Block.
This one. This is my son's favourite. Do you know this one?
Oh, I do indeed. It's a lovely thing.
To see ba-rum-pa-bum-bum. Our finest gifts we bring ba-rum-pa-bum-bum, rum-pa-bum-bum, rum-pa-bum-bum. Peace on earth, can it be? Years from now, perhaps we'll see. See the day of glory. See the day of goodwill, live in peace, so peace on earth. When we come, every child must be made. Every child must be made to care enough for his fellow man, to give all the love that he can. I pray my wish will come true. As for my child and your child too, I'll see my day of glory. I'll see my day when men of goodwill live in peace again, and peace on earth. Can it be? Can it be?
It's a pretty thing, isn't it?
A podcast about authentic people doing beautiful things. Enjoy the show.
Well, happy holidays, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program. This is your host, Andy Gurvich. A fascinating thing happened to me on the way to doing this introduction today. I recorded about a 25-minute complex and an emotionally wrought intro for the show where I introduce this week's guest, lay a little context for the conversation, and talk about perseverance through trials and what happens when things come our way that are unexpected and how we deal with them. Builds so much of the person that we are. Our wonderful guest. How about that Rima Zaman last week? Let's thank her again for just bringing her full self and her full art to the program. If you check out her work and see her, you will see that she is just a vision of transformation, of beauty, and of power. What you might not get from seeing a photo of Rima is that when you're in her presence, you're just in the presence of such grounded endurance and assurance and calm, but assertive will in a way that is just so refreshing to be around. What a grounded person, and what a person with a steely focus on being an agent of transformation and beauty in the world. And one of the things we learned from Rima last week was that we can't control the things that happen to us, but we can control our responses to them. And she talked about this at length and illustrated it with a very vivid and gut-wrenching story. So I recorded this wonderful introduction and then hit stop, and my wonderful tape machine here erased the entire thing. To which I freaked the holy heck out and wanted to break the machine with a hammer and ranted and screamed and yelled. My blood pressure shot up, and I ran around the house for about 20 minutes and then just left and went and ran errands. And as I was running errands, driving down the road like a maniac, I realized, oh, that's ironic. That just happened to me. Something happened that pales in comparison to what other people have to deal with, especially some of the stuff Rima was talking about. And then when faced with a little bit of adversity, I had a complete meltdown and ran from the house screaming like my hair was on fire. So we're going to try this again, and I will say this, universe, lesson learned. So onward and upward, but it does give me a chance to thank Rima and say that, if children, her parents should be very proud of the Zaman name if you have a person like this carrying it out into the world. So on to this week. We are so happy you're here. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. This is our Christmas episode. And I'll tell you, folks, I'm going to take a little bit of time with this introduction because I got to tell a story or two to lead into today's discussion. Merry Christmas. This is the Christmas episode. And however you celebrate this holiday season, whatever this day means to you, we're happy you're with us. We're happy you're celebrating, and we hope you are safe and with people you love. And doing something meaningful and beautiful this time of year together. Okay, so, here's the story. Several years ago, I had the idea to do this show. I wanted to do a show about transformation and creativity, and we wanted to bring guests on that embodied, that were authentic people doing beautiful things in the world. And early on in the show, we had some guests that said a few things during the interviews that I didn't totally agree with. As they were saying them. And I remember thinking at the time, do I challenge the guest, or do I just allow them to tell their story of transformation and then let the audience hear it and let the audience decide what they think? And we decided at the time that this wasn't going to be a show where we engaged people to try to argue or defend positions, but that we were just going to let people be their authentic selves and let the audience hear that. And so that's been a driving theme as we've gone, as we've developed this program. Another thing that's interesting is as I listen back to the show, I hear a lot of things that I've said that I don't know if I necessarily agree with anymore, right? So then the other question is, do I even agree with myself half the time? And those of you that know me know that I'll engage provocative ideas for the sake of engaging the creative and intelligent people that I know in rigorous discussion. I think it's the rabbi in me. And I'm frequently educated out of positions that I hold either strongly or loosely in conversation. One read of my Facebook wall, and you will see very patient and very intelligent friends of mine disabusing me of all kinds of silly things that I believe. So it's a show about engagement. And as I've said, after this last election season, I have been given a calling to reopen channels of investigation and bridge building across ideological aisles that may have otherwise been drawn with some sort of finality. So to that end, I want to have a conversation about a word that is probably off-putting to a lot of folks who are listeners of this program. And, we made a contract with the listeners of this broadcast when we started that we would bring you engaging, relevant, thought-provoking material and not try at least not to do it in a way that shocks the conscience. And so to listeners of this show that don't have any particular spiritual bent, or to listeners of this show who have a very particular spiritual bent, we thank you for being here, and I ask you to just track with us for the next couple of hours where we go into a conversation about the word God. I am a person who comes from a very violent secular Jewish family. My father was in the mafia. He was a very abusive man. My brother was physically and sexually abusive to me for my entire life until I left the house. My mother was an utter tyrant and an emotionally and physically abusive person. My father at times would chase me through the house with a loaded shotgun. A couple of occasions actually put it cocked down my mouth in an attempt to scare me, I guess, which obviously worked. So I came from a very volatile and hostile background. And when I was a teenager, a dear friend of mine, a friend that I've made contact again with recently, a friend named Joel, started playing music with him, and he was a spiritual guy, and he attended a church, and so I went along with him once, and met some folks who at the time were very excited to meet me and sort of didn't have this story of me that my family had of me. My family was volatile. My dad had 5 marriages and kids in all of those marriages, and I was the last kid from the last marriage, and for some reason his favorite, I think he realized all of the brokenness he left around the country and decided he was going to make it all up with me. And so when these other older children came around, they saw him spoiling this new little young child and ignoring them for most of their lives. And so there was a lot of hostility, a lot of division in my home. And so when I met a group of people that purported an entirely different way, an entirely different orientation, a bonding, a love for one another, community, safety, and above all, one could engage in this love of a father figure in a safe and thriving and beautiful way. And so I was profoundly moved by this. And it led to several years of my life of participating in organized religion. I ended up going to Multnomah Bible College here in Portland, Oregon, and then Western Seminary. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in Christian theology, and a Greek and Hebrew background as well. And then I ended up teaching as a pastor in a church for several years. And then when I was divorced, I had a sort of coming away from the Lord experience. I had a deconversion experience that was profound and disorienting and led me into several years of sort of angry atheism. If you can imagine, when I participated in the church, all of that anger, all of that brokenness and PTSD from my childhood abuse, none of that went away. And as much as I thought I was dealing with it through becoming very religious, in my particular case, I was hiding from all of it still. And so my relationship with my ex-wife, my relationship with my children just fractured, right? And as much as I was trying to cling to something that could teach me how to be a proper man, a proper human, a proper father and husband and member of a community, I wasn't just a sort of church attender. I was a professional Christian. I was a pastor, and it was all just a farce. It just wasn't working at all for me. And so I walked away from it and carried the bitterness with me, and for a while shook my clenched fist at an empty sky, teeth white with rage of spiritual vertigo from this sort of falling that I now felt from being finally utterly detached from transcendence and from any sort of meaning in the universe. And so I went back to graduate school, got a degree in literature, and sort of rebuilt my life and walked away from all of it. But you know, what never left me, folks, was this profound sense of awe when one stands under a night sky, when one goes into nature and sees the handiwork, if you want to call it that, of the creative impulse of the natural world. However it got there, whenever it got there, I certainly didn't put it there. And yet I am a part of it and intimately connected to the creative process that originated that and that world that I'm looking at. And what all of the world's religions teach is that entity is desperate to engage me in some sort of loving and meaningful relationship. Now, what is that? I don't know, right? But I know that there was an interesting individual named Alain of Lille, a French philosopher, that said God is an intelligible sphere, an intelligible circle, that we can know with the mind, but not the senses. An intelligible sphere whose center is everywhere, but whose circumference is nowhere. Joseph Campbell would quote that a lot. The early church fathers of Christianity would say, it is better to say God does not exist than to say God exists like you or I exist. What Joseph Campbell would say was the ground of being. All of us are aware of a ground of our being, of some essential relational truth that is the source and the spark of our existence. And all of us feel a compulsion at one time or another in our life to connect with that, and we do it in different ways. There's a book called The Mirror of Simple Souls that was written by I believe a 15th or 16th century French mystic named Marguerite Porete. She was the first person killed in the French Inquisition, and it was because of this book that she wrote. And in it, she says, you don't need priests and popes and creeds and councils and even the Bible to connect to the sovereign, to connect to the creator. That once one has that authentic and paradigm shifting relational awareness, that waking up moment where one comes into direct relational contact with transcendence, that any of the signposts and guides and things that might have been helpful prior to that are no longer necessary. Well, you can imagine what a church authority would feel about anybody in the Middle Ages saying that, let alone a woman. So she was burned at the stake, along with what they thought were all the copies of her books, but they didn't get them all, and so many of them come down to us still today. So where am I going with all this? And we'll get to our guests for this week here in a minute. I told you we're going to be on a long ride this week. The word God does not mean anything to many listeners to this show. To some listeners of this show, it means a great deal. And to many of you, it means a great many different things. One of the reasons I left the church, right, and you can disagree with this or not, was that it had become too politicized. It had become the sort of moral enforcement wing of the Republican Party in the United States. And that wasn't something I was interested in. Wasn't interested in arguing with people about LGBTQ rights. I wasn't interested in arguing with people about women's reproductive health and choices. I wasn't interested in arguing with people about the age of the earth or Darwinian evolution, or if climate change was real. All of these kinds of things that people now associate with dominion over women, these kinds of things. These were things that weren't my battles. And so I felt disoriented in communities that were increasingly defining themselves by these things, right? So we could do a whole broadcast on that, but suffice it to say, for me, this was disorienting. I talk a lot on this show about what I've branded and others have branded virulent or toxic Abrahamism. Right, those religions that come from the historical figure and religious figure Abraham, and those religions are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And I've spoken at length on this program about the manifestations of those traditions that are toxic, in my view, and what that toxicity has unleashed on the planet. But I guess I want to say that for something to call something to call out virulent or toxic manifestations of these moral codes or of these religious impulses is to suggest that there are non-toxic varieties, that there are manifestations of these ideologies that are not toxic and are indeed essential to some people's understanding of how to thrive and love in the world. So that's where we're going to explore in this episode. You know, when I look to my understanding, as I said, I have some background in this. I'm a professor of religious studies and have spent most of my adult life in a professional context researching these things. But that doesn't, the kinds of things I'm talking about, we're all experts in. And we all have a very deep and personal and immediate connection to. The word religion means to tie back or tie together. And to tie us back and tie us together in what way? The notion is that this is from the Latin, that there was an essential connection that we had to our deepest, most highest self, to the land and the animals, to one another, and to the transcendence. And something has happened to sever that. I would argue overpopulation, and suddenly we find ourselves separated from an earlier awareness that we instinctually had, an awareness of connectivity. And so how are we going to reestablish that connectivity? Well, how do we do that? Enter this word, God. To me, in all of my study of these traditions, the word means other, capital O, other than you. So my encounter with the transcendence is an encounter with other, but it's a relational encounter, and it's an encounter with other that is based on bliss and transformation. And so how does one serve this other when one encounters the great transcendent other? We serve the big O other through service of little o other. It says over 1,100 times in the Christian scriptures to serve widows and orphans and the travelers among us. Right? The emphasis over and over again that you serve God by serving others. The Augustine said, preach the gospel always, when necessary, use words. Meister Eckhart said, if the only prayer you ever say is thank you, then you've said enough. Right? So when I look to the world and I see people that are driven by a transcendent, ecstatic, joyous need to encounter and embrace other, I see people in my mind that have embraced and are serving God, whether they would call it that or not. Some people need to call it that and need to connect themselves to a certain tradition in order to help give shape and sense and momentum and connectivity and community to that experience. And other people are mystics and find their way into this same space in a slightly different way. When I look around me, when I was just putting this introduction together, when I see our good friend Kelly Jeske taking Dami Shoemaker, just dropping everything at a moment's notice and taking Dami up, driving up north and leaving her job and everything here to take Dami up north to get there in time to be with Dami's dying mother. When I think of Lydia Yuknovich, who I talk about regularly on this show, and here's a person who's worked so hard to achieve a modicum of access and success and opportunity in the world. And what does she do with it? She immediately turns around and is sort of desperately shoveling all of the energy and all of the resources and all of the opportunity that she's been given into the laps of everybody that she can find. If there's a person in need that's connected to this individual, she is doing anything she can, burning herself as a funeral pyre to serve those less fortunate or those that just need opportunity, those that are artistic and powerful and beautiful and just need to be told so and given the opportunity. There's Lydia with the torch leading the way, not to rest on her laurels and sit on her opportunities and accomplishments, but to be an opportunity maker or conduit for everyone else. When I think about my friends Joel and Sue, who when I called them yesterday, they were making big pots of potato soup to go take to a park near them where a bunch of homeless people were. I think about a little girl I saw on the news who's like 10 years old and had this idea to make these shoe boxes filled with art supplies and food and like little hygiene things and a note that says you matter in the world and I care about you, and send thousands of these around the world to children in developing countries. And these people, some of them say it is God that is driving them, and they're very clear. Why are you doing this? God. Others in the list that I just gave would not use that word at all. and say, I don't need or don't relate to a concept of a God in order to connect to that energy, right? And that's why I go back to this Campbell notion of the ground of being. In our embrace of other, who needs quote unquote God and who doesn't, to me is not as essential as the primary question of why are we here on this world, right? And I mean that more in ask yourself internally, ask yourself in your cells, right? There's a verse in the Bible in 1 Corinthians when the author says, "Now we see only a reflection as in a mirror, then at such time when we encounter fully the transcendence, we will see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known." Let me say that last line again. Then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. Think about that line. This entity, this creative, transcendent power that is at the base of all existence. Right, what all of the world's spiritual traditions teach is that it is hungry to know us, and there is a capacity that we hold. There is an opportunity we have to know this transcendence as much as it knows us. Right, in our very cells, the 50 trillion molecular geniuses that, as Jill Pulte Taylor says, that makes up our form. So, I go back and forth on this, folks. I'll be there with you talking about all of the toxic manifestations of Abrahamism in the world. But on this Christmas Day, I want to shift our perspective a little bit and talk about one of the other kind. If there's a person in the world that embodies the teachings of Jesus in a way that are the opposite of the toxic things I was mentioning a second ago, it's my friend Pastor John Voelz. I met John 20-something years ago when I was a student at Multnomah Bible College, and we became immediate friends, fast friends, and very close friends. John is an amazing guy, an amazing musician, a dear pastor and father and husband and friend. When my ex-wife and I lost a child, it was John who played music at the funeral and invited us into his home, his wonderful family, for a time afterwards, a gathering afterwards. When I was divorced, it was John who offered friendship and kindness and connectivity and relationship. When I became an atheist and walked away from the religion, it was John who just said, "I love you, man, and you're my friend, and that wherever your path leads, nothing changes that." And so this is a guy that, in all of the ways I've been talking about and more, embodies a deep, transformative love for other. And he speaks about it in a very specific way, and you're going to hear about that in this conversation. But I think what you're going to also hear in this conversation is that essence that I've been talking about through the rest of this intro, right? A person who is just in love with humanity, a person who just has devoted his entire life to be of service to others, right? And through the making of art and music, and through the telling of stories, and through the empowering of children to tell their own stories, right? And so how this man has used his own creativity to bear his heart to the world and to empower others is something that I continue to be inspired by. I continue to be thankful to know him, and I am thankful for the challenge to bring his ideas and his story before the On the Block audience. We have a wide variety of folks on this program that represent a wide variety of views, and this is one that I've kept away from the program for a while because it's a complicated part of my life that I'm still trying to figure out how to reintegrate. Right? And this is a process for all of us. But I think this time of year, especially after this last election cycle, now more than ever, cries for unity need to be buttressed with some real legwork of understanding and bridge building and an embrace of other in our common humanity. And so that's what this show is about. That's what this episode is about. And I think that's what Pastor John's life has been about. I think you're going to enjoy hearing him. He's a humble man and a beautiful human being. And as I said, at least in my experience, no finer walking embodied example of the principles he claims to represent than I've ever met. Okay, so happy holidays, folks. Thank you for being with the program. We hope you enjoy the episode. We got a lot of music for you this week, more songs in this episode than we've had in any other On the Block episode, and that's because it is my belief, and I think John's also, that music is something that speaks directly to the soul. I've spoken about it here before, and a lot of you know this, there's been so much research on how music and rhythm and song can generate collective consciousness unlike anything else. And so that is why so many of the world's spiritual traditions, anytime people are coming into a circle, anytime people are coming into a collective space in order to encounter spiritual things, it almost always starts with song, with dance, with drumming at the beginning of the ritual in order to sort of tune everyone's consciousness towards the same end. And the end we're tuned towards today is not an end of overly labeling things and preaching a certain religion at people. The aim we are directed at today is creating a space together of love, of our common humanity, of transformative sacrificial grace, and of the need we all have for forgiveness and for relationship with the very ground of our being and with one another. So we love you for being here. We love you, John, for being a part of our lives. And we will see you folks on the other side.
Thanks for listening to OTE, a digital love letter between what is and what is possible. More after this.
Invade my life, invade my thoughts, invade my mind, invade my plans, invade my dreams, invade my time. Invade my eyes, invade my ears, invade my days, invade my years, invade my words, invade my speech, invade my all. Live through me, your life in me, and let my life tell the story. Let my life tell the story. Invade my heart, invade my head, invade the start, invade the end. Invade me, invade me, invade
$9 for a latte and a muffin?
Is that guy seriously vaping inside?
OMG, the Wi-Fi is so slow. What is wrong with the world?
Sup?
Moses!
You mow it.
Where have you been? You look so lumber chic.
I was hiking on the Appalachian Trail for the past 40 days when I heard the voice of God. He gave me these 2 tablets. Did he push the warranty on you?
You know, he didn't.
But he did give me these updated 10 commandments to share with the modern world.
Good, because everything is the worst.
Commandment 1. Thou shalt not say everything is the worst.
Oh, I feel like an idiot.
Yeah, well, you should, okay? Because, there's really terrible things happening in the world. Your low cell phone battery isn't one of them. Commandment 2. Thou shalt use headphones when listening to music on public transportation.
But the ones you put in your ears hurt. My ears are so tiny.
Then use the over-the-ear kind.
Fine.
Commandment number 3. Thou shalt not spoil major plot points of TV shows and movies.
What if the show's really old?
Yeah, well, okay, so God does allow for a statute of limitations there. Anything older than 6 months is fine. You know, it's up to thou to keep thyself up to date. Commandment 4. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Unless thou art in an open, ethical, polyamorous relationship.
Yeah, I'm very open-minded to how hot that is.
How does anybody even make those work?
Okay, well, it's not up to thou to understand how it works, okay? Thou just has to respect it and chill. Cool? Cool. Number 5! Honor thy mother and father with a video chat at least once a month.
But they don't know how to use the cameras. It's all like foreheads and ceilings.
Okay, they gave you life. It's literally the least you can do.
Is that the real literally or the fake one?
It's the real literally. 6! Thou shalt not go on a gluten-free diet unless thou art celiac. And if thou aren't sure if thou art celiac, thou art probably not celiac, because that messes you up.
God's okay with cursing?
Yeah, he f***ing invented it.
Yeah.
Number 7. Thou shalt not share an article that thou only read the headline of.
But what if you totally got the gist of it?
No, and you don't. Commandment 8. Thou shalt not text thine to call thou, and then not answer when thine call thou.
I'm confused.
Yeah, it's how he wrote it. It's like, don't text me to call you, and then when I call you, you don't pick up.
Could have said that.
9. Thou shalt use thy turn signals while driving.
But it's hard to push the blinker. My hands are so tiny.
No one can read your mind. It's a common courtesy, all right? You're weirdly concerned about your small body parts. Number 10. Thou shalt not worship false idols.
No, not Wi-Fi. We love Wi-Fi. Don't touch it.
Oh, I'm getting a text from God.
Name dropper.
The God?
What did he say?
Yeah, he says, hey Moses, I've been thinking about it, gonna add an 11th commandment. Everything is literally the word.
Wait, is that the real literally or the fake?
It's the real one. I know how to use the word. You know what, Cynthia?
What?
Shut up.
You shut up.
You shut up.
I kiss the sun in the summer, burns me up till I'm blind. I kiss the cold in the winter, but I don't really mind. If they asked any money, I would give any money to the sun and the wind and the rain to be kind. Prayed the rain to keep up, but it kept coming down. Wash my hands of it all, but it's all over
program, folks. This is your host, Andy Gurvich. Our guest this week, I tell you, when we started this show, I had a dream, I had a vision to bring people onto the program whose heart was broken open for the world and who used their entire self, every cell in their body, to seek transformation and liberation for every broken and shattered soul out there. And I wanted to bring folks on the program and lay before you, the listener, their story, their heart, and let you hear what it is that makes them tick, what it is that drives them to be of service to their fellow man. And our guest this week is a guy who's been a friend of mine, a close friend of mine, despite many times that I've tried to kick him out of my life. He won't go away, the son of a bitch. John Voelz is a tamed rebel, an artist, a songwriter, a painter, a musician, a writer, a pastor, an aggravator, a father, a husband, a friend, a teacher, and a mentor. His love of all things creative, in tandem with a severe angst towards mediocrity and religiosity, has given him a unique platform as a voice in the church, both local and worldwide. He is currently the pastor curator at Lakeside Church in Folsom, California, and has been one of my best friends for my entire life. And I'm so happy to have you here, man. Welcome to the show.
Man, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, well, let's wrap it up. That's great. All right, thanks for listening, folks.
Shall we pray?
Yeah, bow your heads. So where'd you grow up, man?
Oh, I was born in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay.
My dad was a yacht painter, yacht refinisher. His brother owned a yacht yard in the San Francisco Bay Area.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
in Richmond, California.
Okay.
And then he also owned a bar in Crockett, California,
Wow.
which was by the C&H Sugar Factory. And
Really?
Yeah, man. I used to sleep as a kid in the back of this bar while my dad would tend bar late at night. Yeah, it was crazy.
The 70s were a different time, weren't they?
They were great, man. Yeah, listening to Elvin Bishop on the jukebox, from the back room.
Wow.
And then when I was about 9 years old, my parents said, I think it's time for a lifestyle change, whatever that looked like. They just felt like they needed something different.
Yeah.
And they went out and bought a brand new Volkswagen Westphalia camper. And I remember my dad taking me to Tower Records and saying, hey, buy whatever you want music-wise for this trip. We're going to be gone for a few months. And then, so he let me pick my soundtrack.
Wow.
And then we toured the United States looking for a place to settle. Came right back to California after a few months. And then I spent a good deal of years in Grass Valley, California.
So, well, go ahead, finish.
No, that's fine. So the bulk of my upbringing was between the Bay Area and then living up in Gold Country in
Grass Valley, not too far from the prison, in Folsom.
Yeah, that's right.
One of the things that's amazing is that, we met actually in Bible college here in Portland, Oregon in 1994, and I want to get to that in a little bit, but I went to elementary school with your wife in Grass Valley.
Yeah, that was a trip. I can't even remember how we figured that out, but
blows my mind. We were actually in the same school at the same time.
Yeah, I found your picture in a yearbook.
Yeah, when you were there. Same goatee, everything. It was amazing,
exactly.
Man. A question that just came up. So, it's not that uncommon to pick music to listen to in a car for a trip, but 9 years old, your dad takes you to Tower, pick anything you want. Was music already an important thing to you by that age?
Oh, yeah, it was hugely important. And I had a tiny little, record player.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that. It was it was a Bugs Bunny record player.
Mm-hmm.
Had a
nice
carrot microphone. My dad was so great. He used to let me just borrow his records and then play them in my room, you know. So I'd go to my dad and say, oh, what should I listen to? And my dad would say, oh, listen to this, And so he totally shaped my music influences. He would walk into my room when I was playing something in the 80s and just shake his head, what are you listening to, man? And I remember my dad
League.
Exactly. My dad saying things like, these guys have no soul. And then he would turn around and walk out, so even as a kid, I'm going, no soul, what does that mean?
Wow.
And just trying to find music that had some meaning and that was honest. And so my dad totally shaped that for me.
What were your favorite bands that time growing up? Do you remember?
Growing up, I listened to a lot of Rod Stewart,
nice,
Johnny Cash, Santana, Van Morrison. My dad was a huge Van Morrison fan, so
I hear you singing Steely Dan off and on.
Oh gosh, yeah, Steely Dan. That was a huge part. Yeah. Yeah.
When did faith become a thing that was important to your family and to you? How did that come about? Was that something you were born into, or did that happen at some point?
Most certainly not born into it.
Okay.
Not that my parents were. They weren't afraid of it, or they just didn't go down that road. It wasn't a topic in our house. It wasn't something they were striving to do or seek to understand. It just wasn't part of our lifestyle.
Yeah.
But when I was 9 years old, and we came back from this trip, and settled in Grass Valley, there was this lady who lived down the road. At that time, I thought she was an old lady. She was probably in her 40s.
Yeah. Oh, geez, that old, huh?
But she took a risk. It was a huge risk, man, because she came onto our property. We had 10 acres, and my dad was, he very well could have been walking around the property naked that day. Smoking weed and walking around the property and listening to Van Morrison.
That was his vibe?
Yeah, that was his vibe. And so, but this lady came down the driveway and said, "Hey, do you mind if I take your kids to Sunday school?" And my parents were like, "Yeah, go ahead and take them." And so, so this beautiful woman, Charlotte, she started taking us to Sunday school and telling us these stories and inviting us to her house. And she had a huge garden. And she had tons of cucumbers in this garden.
Yeah.
And she used to put a little salt shaker out on the post at the end of her garden for us. And we would go over there and break open cucumbers and salt them and eat them.
Just eat them right off the tree.
She had a big swing in the garden. And this lady would just tell us stories, man. And that was my whole introduction into anything with faith.
Wow. So I guess two questions there. What happened next? When did it go from, this nice lady with the cucumbers taking us to hear these nice stories to something where you were like,
yeah,
my life is different now, and my connection to myself and to the people around me and to the God of creation is now vibrant and real. And
sure.
And when did that realization hit you?
Probably about the time. I think I was about 10 years old when, in my limited understanding as a 10-year-old, I thought, this is making sense to me. These stories are compelling. These people, it seems like they're, smoking what they're selling. And
always very important.
right. And so I felt welcomed into a community, and wasn't coerced or pressured or any of that. It was just like, hey, this is here for you. And there was a guy in my teens, I think, especially, that had a huge impact on me. His name was Larry, and I used to just go to his house and listen to records. And he was a Jesus follower. And
Larry Norman?
I wish. No, this Larry. You can look him up on the internet. He was influential. But we probably did listen to Larry Norman albums, and then he had a group of kids that would meet in his house, and talk about Jesus. And I was a guitar player, barely.
Start playing?
Yeah. And he would say, hey, you want to bring your guitar and play some songs? And, so that was hugely, that was a big part of my early faith years.
So when you say take your kids to church, it was you and who else? When she asked to take your parents' kids?
At that time, I just had one brother. I now have 3 younger brothers.
Okay.
But at that time, it was me and my brother Phil, and I think he was 7 at the time. And and she would just pick us up in her little Honda CVCC,
Have you been able to, is she still alive?
She is, man.
Have you been in contact with her? Does she know the life that opened up for you after that?
Dude, this is a crazy story. Yeah, she does. And her daughter and husband had a huge influence on my parents, which they have this whole legacy, with our family.
Yeah. Wow.
They're great people. And it's funny, when I was a kid, I had started woodworking. And I thought, I want to do something to appreciate her, something she would love. And so I remember going out to my grandfather's tools, and I made this little wooden cross necklace. It was nothing, man. It was just, it was like popsicle sticks glued together barely, it was, it was a little bit more intricate. But,
I'm sure,
So I made this thing, put a little gold ring in the top of it, and made her this cross. And I don't know, maybe 3 years ago, I get a box in the mail, and I open it up, and it's this cross.
No.
And there's a letter that she's handwritten me. And she says, from the day I met you, I've been praying for you and your entire family. And I'm so proud of the man that you've become.
Oh, man.
And I wanted you to have this back because I'm getting so close, I don't know when I'm going to meet Jesus.
Yeah.
And I want you to have this back.
She kept it that whole time.
She kept it that entire time, and I have it on my desk.
Wow.
I wept like a baby.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful story.
What do you attribute that to? I mean, I know, you attribute that to God, but unpack that a little bit. What are those kinds of, since I've known you and since you've been here this weekend, you've told me 1,000 stories, and we'll probably get to a couple of them in this conversation, but those long loops that then close themselves, like these relational loops that span decades, and these people that have such profound influence. I mean, our friendship has done this, right? It was so influential, and then it kind of spun in different directions. We weren't not friends, but we haven't been in close contact in each other's presence for a while. And but then it comes back together, and all of that immediacy, all of that love, all of that power is still right there. I mean, that's pretty remarkable, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, of course, I'd say that God has something to do with that. I mean, certainly her motivation, I think, was deeply rooted in a belief. She has a deep-seated belief that if she prayed for this kid his entire life and thought of him, and I was on her mind, which is a powerful thing, man, to think that somebody somewhere has you on their mind right then. That's a powerful, humbling thing. So when you read a letter like that so many years later, that's why it wrecks your world, I mean, in all the good ways.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my goodness, somebody's been thinking about me.
You know what I mean?
So that's her motivation, but I mean, it takes intentionality, man, right? You have to believe in people. You have to see people as human. You strive every day you make choices to stay in people's life, right, and to hear from them. And so I don't think that we're just puppets and God is orchestrating something, and he's like, I'm going to close this loop, can't wait till they figure it out. I think that it takes intentionality, and I do think that that's what God desires of us, but sure, there's a responsibility on us to love and to pursue one another.
So when you found a home in the church, these stories of transformation and of abundant life, as you and I have talked about, made sense to you, and through high school you're playing music. You start playing in bands and stuff. When did you start thinking about a life in the ministry? Because there's one thing to sort of respond to these things as a lifestyle, and it's another thing to say I feel a call to make my living in this work, or to do not to be a Christian as what I do while I'm an engineer, but I'm going to be a professional Christian. When did that?
Yeah.
When did that come about, man?
For me, at a young age, I don't know if how this was impressed upon me, but somewhere early on, I decided that I was going to say yes to as many things as possible to just kind of drink life in, right?
Yeah.
And so I would have these opportunities that people would invite me to speak or play music at a camp, or and I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I would say, what can I learn in this? And then after doing that for quite some time, I started hearing these stories from other people where they would say, have you ever thought about doing this full time? Is this something that? So for me, it wasn't some kind of an experience where I
lightning bolt kind of thing. Yeah.
Right? No, not at all. It was kind of that safety in a multitude of counsel kind of concept where you're hearing from enough people, and then you go, oh, okay, maybe I should think about this. And I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know what the next step was for me. I wasn't a student particularly. I didn't enjoy school. I thought that was probably part of it, right? I probably need to know something if I'm going to,
I'm going to do this. Yeah,
I'm going to do this. But I was sitting in church one day, and I remember the pastor. His name was Ed. He's not with us anymore, but he had a huge impact on my life. he was talking about seasons of mediocrity in our life, and I thought, oh, you know what, I think I'm in one of those seasons. Like I need to just say yes. I need to just make a step towards this. And what's the worst thing that could possibly happen? And so I had this plan to go home. My wife had stayed home that day with the kids, and I had this plan that I was going to go home and tell her I think I should go back to school and maybe pursue ministry full time, which was going to be a tall order, right? I'm a young married guy, kids, and hey, we're going to leave everything. We have no money. And
and we all know how much money you make in ministry.
Tons, loads. No, I mean,
you got the TV show. No way.
People always joke about that, but I feel very content and happy with my life.
I mean, at that time, going to a young wife and children, going, "Hey, let's go try this out." And,
sure,
and that's definitely that's not a prosperous economic future when you're standing at the front of it. You know
exactly.
What I mean? And so that's heavy duty.
Yeah. If I wanted to make money, I'd do Amway.
Yeah, right.
Sorry for that.
Nice. We'll cut that out post. Don't worry.
Yeah, thank you. And so I drive home, and my wife meets me at the front door, and I'm like, "Hey, I've got some things to tell you." And she said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about some things too." And I said, "Well, you go first." And and she's like, "Yeah, I was taking a bath today. The kids were taking a nap, and I looked over, and you had some like catalogs from schools, and I don't know. I think maybe God might be calling you into this full-time ministry thing. Maybe we should consider going back to school."
So she beat you to the punch.
Yeah, and then she's like, "So, what do you want to talk about?" It was interesting. So I said, "You know what? I don't think that's a coincidence. I mean, could it have been? Absolutely." But I decided to say yes and walk through that door, and so we went back to school, and that started that next phase.
When you came to Multnomah Bible College, is that where I met you?
That's exactly when that came. Yeah, moved to Portland, and
there are a couple things that come up there, man. Before we move forward, I love this idea. So many things that I love. I think our audience is really going to enjoy hearing from you, because I think you represent so much the opposite of what maybe they're used to, or what they think they're going to encounter when they encounter somebody who identifies as a Christ follower. And one of the things that blows me away, when I was more active in the church, I always had mixed feelings about in the 90s, it was all about the testimonial, right? So you get some person who, was smoking crack or a prostitute or something, and then you get them to come say the sinner's prayer, and then get their act together a little bit, and then you get them on the stage, and then they get the mic and they go, "I used to be a prostitute, I used to do crack, and then I came to the Lord, now my life's fine, and now my life makes sense, and now my life has meaning." And I was talking with some friends about this a few weeks ago, a couple of Christian friends, and I was talking shit about the testimonial, and they were like, "Hang on, there's a purpose for this, there's a function for this," and I get it, right? Because you're trying to communicate a story of victory, a story of transcendence, right? Of people who have encountered the sovereign of the universe who's been waiting for them and is saying, you don't have to be alone. You don't have to suffer. You don't have to look for acceptance in drugs and sexuality and these things. You already have it as a child of mine. And so people stepping into that truth and then experiencing that freedom, that's a very powerful thing to share to a room full of people, right? And say, this is available for you too if you're here, or that, this is a reaffirming if you're somebody who already has experienced that thing. But one of the things that I think was harmful about it is it if not handled correctly, it could communicate that once you're on the team, you always have all the answers. And when I hear you talking about like, gosh, I'm thinking about this and I'm struggling and I don't know and I'm praying about it and I'm talking to my wife, you're feeling, when you look back on it, you can see how you were being pulled that whole time. And maybe, and I don't want to speak for you, this is more of a question, and maybe in moments you could feel like this is the right choice, I feel like we're being led, I feel like we're being pulled. But other times you're like other regular folks, right? You're trying to sort it out and you're asking questions and you don't know, right? You're just trying to do the next right thing in front of you.
Oh gosh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a freeing thing for people to hear, because I think a lot of religious people think once you become a person of faith, you never question anything anymore, including like what career I should go into, or if we should move across the country, or if we should have another kid. Like these things will just be magically revealed to you.
Well, I think that a lot of religious people perpetuate that myth because that's what they've understood, and so they even try to fool themselves into thinking that they're going to have those answers or that they know the answer to every question.
Sometimes you do. Sometimes you do feel that pretty strong pulling.
Well, sometimes, absolutely. But it's okay to question, and it's okay to doubt, and this is all part of what it means to be human, and. So, as a person who is a Jesus follower, I want to try to create communities as best as I know how to where people feel that freedom to say, hey, guess what? I've been a Jesus follower for 20 years, and and I have a question. I don't get this thing, and this thing in the Bible doesn't make sense to me, and I don't know what I should do with my life here, and absolutely.
You mentioned your wife, and so can you tell our audience a little bit? I mean, this is your high school sweetheart.
She is. My wife, Tawny.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, we met when we were 15, and we got married when we were 19.
Wow.
We wanted to wait till we matured, so we waited a year out of high school.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
And,
Unbelievable.
Yeah, so we're going on 30 years of marriage, man. We'll be married 30 years this year.
Congratulations, man.
Thanks. Yeah, and that hasn't been easy. That's another thing that...
It's another relationship.
It's another relationship that takes intentionality. It takes work. It takes saying, I'm sorry. It takes saying, this is the first time I've ever done this, or second or third, I mean, I'm not making fun there, you know what I mean? It's like new experiences, and for us, we... we're still together, and we're very thankful, and we're very much in love. And there's times where I'm a jerk, and and I don't like her so much, and we have to admit that to one another, and then work through those feelings, and say, hey, are we committed to this? And for 30 years it's been a resounding yes, but that doesn't make it easy,
right?
There's been super, super difficult years, man. As a matter of fact, I went through a time when I was in Bible college where, my wife's working full time. I'm working. I'm going to school. I'm trying to make these things work. And here I'm a Bible college student.
Yeah.
And my marriage is failing.
Wow.
And we sat, I remember this one day sitting on the couch looking, into each other's eyes and going, what's going on? We're in Bible college, and I would say to my wife, you want me to quit? Because I'll quit. Like, I'm in. I'll quit this, and I'll go work wherever to make money. Because, as with most young families, money is a big deal, and it was for us. And she would say, no, don't you dare quit now. Keep going.
Yeah.
We're in this, and we made it through that, but, I even had some guilt during that time because I'm like, wait a second here, Bible college student. I'm probably supposed to have a good marriage. And
yeah, right.
I actually, dude, I took a class with one guy. His name was Dave Needham. Fantastic guy, and I was getting a good grade in his class, and this one exam I got a 98% on, and he calls me into his office and he's like, hey, you got this 98% on your test. And I was like, that's right, Mr. Needham. And he's like, yeah, I'm disappointed in you. And I was like, what?
You're like, but I got just 2 points.
Yeah, exactly. I got a 98, and he's like, look, you are a full-time student, you're married, you have 2 kids, and you have a job, and you got a 98 on my test. I know what it takes to get that. So what is failing in your life?
Wow.
And I was like, oh, are you kidding me?
That guy was something else, wasn't he?
He was, yeah.
He would, I was in classes with him, and he would pray before class, and he would... he would start looking to the back of the room to some spot past the wall,
right,
where he was looking right into the face of God, right? And so much so that when I would look at his face, I would turn around to see if there was something coming through the wall, like, Kool-Aid Man style, or some light glow or something, you know what I mean? Like, because I was like, what is he looking at? Because he's looking at, like, and it feels like something's looking back at him, man. Like, he was a really intense dude. He was all there. That was a profound man in my life, too. He was a beautiful person.
Yeah. And, not anybody could say those things to me. You
Yeah.
have to, if you're going to give that kind of correction and you're going to edit people like that, you have to be in relationship with them, which is one of the things that I'm super sad and super sorry for, and feel like I need to apologize from people in my own camp who call themselves Jesus followers and feel like it's their right or their charge to correct people, to somehow be the sin police for the world. And I don't know, man, I don't see that anywhere in the Bible that's my role. And so it was a relationship that I had with this guy. I trusted him. I had other conversations with him.
You had given him that kind of access to
I invited him to be an editor, and that's powerful.
Yeah.
Like when you have somebody you invite into your life and you're like, hey, I may be blind to some things. It's powerful to have them speak into you and
truth you,
and correct you and I don't mean spank you, correct you. I mean, like, hey, maybe we should think
that was
about
like a
this.
month ago on the show.
I heard that episode.
Anyway, man, that's powerful, man. And tell us about your kids.
My oldest daughter, Carissa, is married to a great guy. He spent some time in the Navy, and he's going to school full time right now. He wants to be a lawyer.
Aren't they in the Seattle area?
Charlie. No, Carissa, they spent some time there.
Okay.
He was on the Seawolf. He was a nuke sub guy.
Oh,
so
wow.
he did some time in Seattle, and they love the Pacific Northwest, but they're in Jackson, Michigan right now. And they have 3 kids, so I've got 3 grandkids right now, man.
Wow.
They're great. Edison, Clara, and Betsy.
Oh my gosh, how sweet.
Gosh.
How old?
Oh, gosh, I'm going to get this wrong, but like 6'4", like around there,
right
all right?
in there.
Give or take a few, and give me some grace on the months.
You know what I mean? And then Connor?
And then my son Connor, he's the middle child, and he just got married this past year. And then my youngest daughter, Cassidy, she's 17, and she still lives at home.
I want to ask you some questions about her after the break. But one of the things I'm interested in is in just talking about your formative years and going into ministry and these struggles early on and marriage having, that period, that low point for a second, wondering if you should be in Bible college. What about the faith itself? Has there ever been a time when you questioned the entire, and I don't mean like corners of it on the edges, or like, oh, Lord, why would you allow me to go through this difficult time? But am I talking to anybody or not? Did you ever have moments like that? Was there a period of time? Has it never happened? I'm fascinated in this.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, man. And absolutely yes.
Wow.
And I don't, this is an important thing because I don't believe that doubt is the opposite of faith. I think that doubt is part of faith. I think you cannot have faith, by definition, unless there is some doubt.
Right.
Because faith is saying, well, okay, I'm going to trust. I'm going to walk through this door, And even if it doesn't always make sense, and there's been plenty of times where it hasn't made sense to me, and there's been plenty of times where I've questioned, small to large things. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a super freeing thing. I think people need to. I think we do people a disservice if we somehow create a world where doubt cannot be part of your faith. That sets people up for failure. Oh my goodness! Like if somebody says, "Yeah, I think I'm gonna try this Jesus thing," but then they have these doubts. Well, I'm not supposed to have these doubts. Then they're like, "Okay, check, please." Right?
Absolutely, man.
We have to be able to be honest about these things.
This is a show about you've heard the show before, we're friends. This is a show about transformation and creativity. And you're one of the most creative people I know. And your art.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely, man. And your art, even, we've had a lot of talk about art over the past couple of days. And we've talked about the purpose of art. And I showed you an introduction I wrote on Indonesian tribal art book. And in the introduction, it talks about how the artist is responsible for a showing forth of transcendence. And that these are what artists do for their society, is they show forth transcendence. And even when they're not doing religious art, they're doing this. There's a showing forth of transcendent, transformative beauty.
Yeah.
And you've talked about your role as an artist, as an author, as a musician within the church and within the community, to be a kind of voice for that, a voice for the church to see the sort of expanded power of art to really have that capacity to be a showing forth of transcendence, even if it's not a song directly about Jesus or something, right? And to be a voice to the community also. So all the events you've done at coffee shops and bars and all these and bookstores or whatever. So a voice to the unchurched, that Christian people aren't just here to proselytize or in the negative sense of that word, but are here to participate in a sort of collective artistic experience that in community building with art, that there's a participation between the audience and the performer where you're co-creating.
Yeah, you are.
Right, and that communication is establishing a relationship, even instantaneously, even if you're at a concert, right? A relationship that it creates this infinity loop back and forth of trust and transparency and openness and vulnerability that mirrors the thing you try to say you want church to be, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, that when you talk about church being a relationship, when you talk about the community having to be open and raw and moving towards godliness slowly in increments, that art can fulfill this for people in terms of ripping open a way to see beyond our sort of mundane existence, and then things become vital again. And I really have seen that in you as an artist. So can you talk about that a little bit, about how that is important to you as an artist and then in your ministry as well?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and I understand where this comes from in church circles. I know where it comes from, but it's unfortunate that I think many in the church see art or anything else, for that matter, as a means to an end. It's the carrier of the message, right? And so therefore, at the end of every 30-minute sermon, we need to wrap this up nice and tidy because we don't want tension.
Yeah.
We don't want people going away with the wrong idea. We don't want people to have questions, and it's weird because it's well-intentioned on the part of a lot of my friends, of course, to do this thing. And then in art too, we're going to create the song, but it's got to have so many, Jesus per minutes, for it to be real, for it to be, for it to be worth something, for it to matter, because God forbid we put this thing out there and it doesn't, somehow seal the deal. And I've never seen art like that. And quite frankly, I don't think Jesus, as I understand him and read about him in the Bible, ever saw anything like that. Neither did Paul. I mean, you name it. You have prophets who are performance artists, making things out of clay and laying on their side and burning hair. And I mean, it's crazy stories in the Bible where you're like, these guys weren't wrapping it up at the end. They were like, okay, so everybody, we're all in, right?
Yeah.
Sign on the dotted line. You guys got this wrapped up. Kumbaya. They're not doing that. So there's this. I've always seen art. Maybe it does have like a prophetic reorientation kind of a role. Like it's a pointing away to something. If I believe in a thing called hope, which I do I want hope to be part of my art? Yeah, absolutely. But sometimes that means that I have to talk about deep, dark, ugly things in my art too, right? Yeah. Because you have to get to a point where people are like, oh, that's honest. Like that's ethos. I believe that.
And that's part of our humanity too. And our spirituality should speak to our full humanity, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I've always seen art as a conversation. It's an invitation into conversation that's both ways, I mean, if I write a song and I put it out there and I'm just like, I don't expect anybody to listen to it or grapple with it or ask me about it. I mean, that's boring, number one, but I feel like I haven't done my job. I guess that was a bad song. We're not talking about it. I want to be able to have a conversation. And art has been that for me, man. I have stood in front of paintings and cried and like I don't even know why.
Yeah.
I'm just like, what is happening to me right now? And And it's such a tender, precious, holy moment to be in that vulnerable state and to ask questions of it. And I'm completely okay as a Jesus follower who is an artist in creating those moments where we can grapple and we can be honest and we can spar friendly fire, or we can just cry together. We can just hold each other, which I've done plenty of times, you know. Those things are important because I think it builds a story between you and your audience. It builds a camaraderie. It builds trust. And then you can have these conversations that you wouldn't otherwise have, these deeper conversations, because you share these moments together where you're like, okay, we got something here, right? And then you can go deep, which is way different than the guy standing on the corner with the bullhorn saying, turn to burn. And
at Bonnaroo, right?
Right, yeah.
Which
was
a list of things. Vegetarians.
Gosh, there's a story. That's an actual thing, you know? It's like, that's so painful for me. You know,
one of the things that I want to say too is that, you know, when I asked you here, I said two things. You don't answer for every weird thing every self-professed Christian has ever done. You know what I mean? Because I think I have a friend named Doug, right? And my friend Doug is kind of a bitter dude. And he found out my friend Adam was a transportation planner in town, right? And so every time Doug hit like a pothole or like a light was out or like anywhere something weird happened, like transportation-wise, Doug would call me and he'd be like, "Tell your fucking friend that there's a pothole on 82nd Avenue near Johnson Green." You know, like my one transportation planner friend is responsible for every transportation-related thing in the city of Portland, where he works on one little office on on this section of the Max line. He's responsible. You know what I mean? Like he has a very limited job. But to my friend Doug, anytime he's in a car anywhere in Oregon and something goes wrong, I better tell my transportation planner friend how screwed up it is, right? And I feel like a lot of times people bear this kind of corporate guilt. And so anybody can call themselves anything and believe that they are that, and then go out and be like, fags are going to burn, right? And then now, and I can experience that, and then now I meet you, and then now it's like, you better answer for that, right? And that can be kind of difficult because you're not responsible for every shitty thing every self-professed Christian has ever said. And the second thing I want to say is that I didn't ask you on the program to try to poke at the church and like, you know, so when I brought up the testimonial thing, or when I bring up this thing here with art in terms of how the church writ large. So for our listeners that don't understand what we mean by the church, we should probably explain that a little bit. We're talking about the sort of collective community of Christ followers across denominations and across time, right? We're referring to this as one collective body. And Augustine said something fascinating about the church, and I heard Tony Campolo quote this once. He said, "The church is a whore, but she's my mother." And I love that. I mean, it's a bit of a misogynist statement, but if we get beyond that, if we get beyond the sort of literal stuckness there, and what he's saying is that you want to talk about unfaithful, you want to talk about frustrating, you want to talk about broken, you want to talk about hypocrisy. The church is as full of it as any other place you're going to go in the world. Because there's people there, right? But you're going to find people there that in that brokenness are trying and reaching out to a better version of themselves, so they can be of more service to their family, so they can be better fathers, so they can be better husbands and wives, and teachers. And so yes, church unfaithful, yes, the church frustrating, and it's my mother, it's my family too as well. And so in the elections, when I've always said, when I go, oh, this part of the country, it frustrates me, and then people, if you don't like America, leave it. And I would always go, wait a minute. Criticizing something, sometimes you can criticize things you love deeply because you see the potential they have, and they're stopping themselves from it. And so, when at least I want to say to our audience and to you, when I'm asking things like that, like the frustration we might feel looking at the church and their response to say transcendental art that isn't so obviously Christian. This isn't me taking a dig at the community. It's me sort of hitting at this very thing that I've said it before. We frequently trade our full inheritance for a thimble full of grace, and this is one of those examples where I've always felt that more is available for people, that they can boldly step into a freer existence, a freer engagement with the complexity of the human experience, and that they've been equipped more than they think they have been to not only engage all of that, but embrace it and see it for the beauty that it is, and see it as an act of micro grace, right? That there's God within that, even if the artist doesn't really even understand what they've just made entirely, right?
Right.
We can see it. We can see the beauty there.
Right. And dude, I think, like, so using the example that you did with your friends, it's easy to blame all the potholes on the Westboro Baptist, which, gosh, I mean, we could we'd go on about that, and please, there's times I see that stuff and I'm like, oh my goodness, please don't speak for me. Please be quiet. Shh, nothing to see here, folks. Kids, get in the car.
Right,
It's like, you want to blame it on them or Ned Flanders or whatever you want to blame it on, but I have to, there is part of me too that goes, well, but me as a Jesus follower, like, I mess things up. Like, sometimes I'm well-intentioned, and I think I'm a lover of people, and sometimes I'm a jerk. Sometimes I say things I wish I could take back. Sometimes I don't treat my wife and kids right, and sometimes I'm withdrawn and full of me, and I've hurt people, and my prayer often is at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, God, don't let me drag your name through the mud because of something that I need to own up to. Yeah. Right. And so sometimes, and when I hear how the church has hurt people, man, I'm deeply, and I understand we're not deconstructing it. I love the church. Yeah. I mean, it's part of who I am. And at the same time, I think if we're ever going to have honest conversations with anybody, then I have to be able to say, we do some horrible things sometimes, even if it's well-intentioned or not. Some horrible things have happened, and I'm part of that, and I'm sorry, even if I didn't do it directly. I want to acknowledge that, this comes from. Maybe somebody in my family, a larger family, and I'm sorry for what they did.
It's beautiful, man. You speaking of something that was done that wasn't harmful, you told me a beautiful story today, and I wonder if you can share it with our audience. You told me a story about a poetry event that you organized, because after you left Multnomah, you ended up in Jackson, Michigan, at a church there. Yeah,
I was in California for a little bit, and then I went to Jackson, Michigan, and back to California. But so when I was in Jackson, Jackson is in like the lower part of the state, right in the middle. It's in between like Detroit and Chicago, closer to Detroit, but close to Ann Arbor. And it's a depressed community. It's there's high unemployment. I mean, it's in the Rust Belt. There, you just like, it's a depressed place to be. And although I believe, and we can talk about this at some time too. No matter where you're planted, there's hope. And so I started like I do all the time, is I'm constantly asking the question, God. What are you doing, and how can I get on board with it? Like, what's happening around here that's beautiful, and how can I get on board with that? How can I support that? How can I bolster, augment that, whatever? How can I be creative? How can I be innovative? How can I invite people into conversation? And so one of the things that we wanted to do to, kind of be the hope in that community was these schools don't have a lot of money. Their arts programs are being shut down. And there was the school who was next door to our church had a poetry month.
Wow.
And I thought, I wonder what we could do to get on board with this poetry month. So long story short, we assembled a group of musicians that would take these kids' poetry, turn it into song, put on a concert, and perform these songs and give these kids a platform, give them a voice.
Wow.
And these are like 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th graders,
Okay.
right?
Uh-huh.
So we did this for a few years, and then it went from the school that was next door to this community-wide event, and there were, multiple schools involved, thousands of poems, coming in, and hundreds of kids involved in this. And
this was just your music team at the church that took this on.
Yeah, well, it was so it was spawned out of that community, but there were plenty of local musicians that I invited I invited to be part of it because I've
massive, yeah.
It's like this guy's got a phenomenal gift here. I'm going to ask him if he wants to breathe life into these kids. Well, of course, I'm not going to rob him of that opportunity.
Yeah.
And so we put together this thing, man, and I'm telling you, it's like I learned more from these kids. We do this thing where we divvy up the poems. I never wanted to like stack the deck, so like go through and go, well, here's an easy song to write.
I'll take that.
I'll take that one. Exactly. So we take these poems and just kind of go around the room, one for you, one for you, one for you, just toss it around the circle. And this guy gives me a call this one night. He's like, dude, I don't think I can write this song. This poem is just too powerful. I can't do it. And I was like, man, I think you can do it. I mean, if you really need me to take it, I can give it a shot. But I think you have something to say. Like, you'll have something to. You can help translate what's being said, and it's a privilege, man. And he's like, okay, I'm in. Here's the poem. And he starts to read it for me, man. And it's this 3rd grade girl who I later found out her dad was incarcerated, right?
Yeah.
And this 3rd grade girl is writing this poem. Dad, you missed my birthday. Dad, you broke your promise. Dad, it's going through this. And it's killing me, man. I'm crying as he's reading this poem. And the end of it is like, but Dad, I forgive you. Dad, I'm going to see you one day. And I'm like, this is a 3rd grade kid.
Oh, my goodness.
And then it all comes, it all, as if that's not enough to, a brick to the face. Then we're putting music to the song, playing for a crowded theater. And this little girl is sitting there, and her entire family is sitting there listening to the song that she's wrote. She's got a big grin on her face.
She's up on the stage.
The
lyrics are up, the poem. Yeah.
Exactly. The poem is up there. And, dude, that is so powerful.
That girl will never forget that. Yeah.
And I won't.
Yeah.
And they won't. There's no way, right?
Not a dry eye in the room, I bet.
Oh, gosh, man. No. Yeah, everybody was sobbing. We didn't even know how to move to the next song.
Yeah,
the next song's about soccer. It's like, what do you do?
Man, we got to go to break in a minute, and I want to ask you something before we go to break, but you just reminded me of something. We were in a speech class together. And for the entire time we were in college, I was a public speaking major, and I was awful. I mean, I was so nervous. I was so scared. Like, I would just stand up there and sweat. And I remember literally, I would hold my speech, and it would start to, like, my hands were sweating so much that the paper would start turning into, like, liquid. Like, it would just mulch the paper back into, like, I was, like, just dripping and just, today I'm going to talk about, and I would write in the margins, like, when I, like, to do a gesture, like, the next point, I would, my hand would go up. Yeah, it would go lower. Yeah, and like raise hand. And I mean, it was just ridiculous. And I was trying to get through this, right? And then people go, "Oh, you're a funny guy, man. Like, tell a funny speech, because you're always cracking people up, like, so just try to do something funny." And so I go, okay, I'll write this funny speech, right? So I don't even know what it was. It was about, like, getting searched at the airport. It was like I was trying to do, like, what's the deal with airplane peanut? You know what I mean? I was just trying to come up with, like, material. And
sure.
There's people that are funny, like, hanging out with their friends and, like, shooting the shit. And then there's, like writing funny, like, comedy is actually our gift. And so it's a lot, and then delivering it with timing and stuff, so it's actually a bad idea when you're bad at public speaking. You go, do something easy like comedy, because it's actually the hardest thing to do, right? So I wrote my speech, what's the deal with airplane peanuts, or whatever it was, right? And then there was this guy, Mike Heyer, right, who was like this big dude in our class, construction worker guy. And he gets up to give a speech, right? And I'm going next after him. And he starts giving this speech about this little dog that he had. right? And it's like he grew up with this little dog, and then like he moved out, and his mom, you know, and his family, they were all, you know, estranged, and he left home and hasn't seen his mom in 10 years and spoken to her because it was abusive family and stuff. And then she called him and was like, oh, Toby's sick and you better come home, you know. So he goes back and gets there and is able to like see this little dog that he grew up with like for the last day before the dog dies, right? He gets there like a day before the dog dies, right? But then he's like, you know, but getting back there and being there with the dog when the dog died, this kind of reconnected him to his mother, and they held each other and cried and talked through all of their things. And now, you know, and he's like this 350-pound dude, and he's like up there, and he's like, I love my mom, and I love Toby, or whatever the dog name, you know, and he's like weeping, right? And everyone in the room is weeping, you know, the teacher, me, you know, it's like, oh, you know, and then we all hug the guy at the end of his speech, you know, this beautiful thing, the dead dog, the mother, the reunion, right? And then they're like, okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Andy Gurvich, right? You know, and so I come up, you know, what's the deal with airplane peanuts? And I'm sweating and I'm shaking and I got my arm in the air, right? And everyone's like, what is wrong with this guy? You know, like what a jerk. Who makes dumb jokes at a time like this? This guy lost his dog, you know. And I got 6 minutes. And, you know, you give the first joke and nobody laughs, right? And so then I'm the sweat. And, what is this?
Yeah, right.
I have it on videotape somewhere.
Oh, my gosh,
Yeah,
man.
I almost left. I was like, I can't be a public. I wanted to be a teacher. I was like, I can't talk to people. I can't talk in front of people.
Right.
Do you know what changed that?
What?
For me, quickly? I was going to give a speech, and we got to go to break in a minute, but I was going to give a speech once, and we were videotaping ourselves, right? And whoever was running the videotape put it in and like had it running already, right?
Yeah.
And I went up to the front, and then like Jeff wasn't ready. He was like the great, you know, our teacher, like he was,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah,
so he
yeah.
wasn't ready for me to start, but the tape was running, and so I was up in front of the class, but the speech didn't start, and I was like this, and I was just normal, and I was like, oh, hey, oh, what's going on, you know, and they were like, oh, we're ready, you know, go, and then I was like, I would like to talk to you. You know what I mean? And I started shaking and sweating like immediately because once the speech started, now it was time to perform, and I didn't feel like a performer, right? And I remember watching that tape with Jeff, and he goes, you know what you need to do is unlearn everything. You need to not give speeches. You just need to go talk to people.
Wow, that's powerful, man.
And I won the impromptu speech contest the next year because I learned that, I figured out that what was required for me is lots of preparation, but minimal notes. And then just go up and talk to people. And now I barely even, I'll go talk to a group of students for 3 hours and almost not need any notes. I mean, just 2 or 3 bullet points and it's fine. But at the time, I couldn't get through 6 minutes without just almost passing out.
Well, dude, you're a fantastic experienced speaker and conversationalist, and like for me, listening to the show has been super powerful. I've learned a lot from you, from your guests. I'm to everybody who's listening right now. I'm so grateful that they're. Hopefully they haven't turned it off, you know, because I'm on today.
Not at all,
you know,
man.
I mean, these conversations have been super powerful, and I think you know, there's another thing about your story that, like. For me, in the religious community, I think a lot of times the religious community has the "what about airplane peanut" story ready to go, right? And they're just like, okay, what's my cue, you know, so I can tell the story. And dude, you have to listen to the dog story, right? I mean, like that's a good metaphor for me. It's like, and if I believe in a thing called hope, and that I'm going to be able to have anything to do, any influence, if I believe that what Jesus said is true, it requires me to listen to a ton of stories. And not just
really hear people,
not
man.
Passively listen, you know, like the garbage truck passing out.
There's something very powerful that happens when people feel heard for the first time.
Oh gosh, it's amazing, right?
Yeah, it really is something else, man.
Yeah.
We're going to go to break here, and during the break, the audience is going to hear a song of yours called "Name," and I wonder if you could just set that up for us a little bit, so they could hear a little bit of the background of the song, because I feel like it's important for them to hear.
Thanks, man. I was asked to be part of this this project. There's a group in Michigan Abolitionist Project. They help educate and they give money to rescuing people out of the sex trade. And I mean, they're doing some incredible work, man. I felt really honored to be asked as a Michigan artist to participate in this project. And it's a daunting task, man, when you're like, hey, people are can actually say something important. Go.
Yeah, right.
So I thought, so for me, the concept of having a name, being known, being heard, those are really important concepts for me. It's a big thing, actually, throughout the Jewish scripture, through Christian scripture, the Old and New Testament. The idea of having a name, or like God's name is one thing, but to us having a name. And there's this passage in Revelation where it talks about us standing before God and Him giving us a stone that has a secret name. I kid you not, like a nickname engraved on it. Like, to think that God has a nickname for me and for everybody who's listening, is like, that is so powerful. So I started
Again, that's a relational thing.
It's totally relational.
Call you T-Bone, right? It's after knowing somebody for a little bit. That's where the nickname comes from. Yeah, it's a very endearing thing.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. Like the Apostle Paul wrote in the book of Romans, he's thanking these people in the end of his letter.
Yeah.
And he mentions this guy named like Tertius, which actually means three.
Yeah.
It's like slaves didn't have names. They were given numbers.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about all those stories. And I thought, man, these people, these children, they have names. They matter to God. And this whole song is about that. And there's a line in it that says, they can't hang a name on me like a tag that bears a price. I am the price. And I'm hoping I'm hoping somebody hears those kinds of things, and that they gain hope from that, or maybe that changes their way of thinking. If they're involved in this at all, at any level, it's these are people with names that matter, and the price that they're paying is their very life.
Yeah, man.
And that's a frightening thing. And I thought, man, if I as an artist can do anything to help, and I don't know what I'm doing with that, man, but there again, it's like walk through that door.
Yes.
You say yes. You don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you can find the song. Actually, you can support the Michigan Abolitionist Project. They have this out on the internet. You can find this song. And
you sent me a copy of it, but I think I'll go find it and buy it from them before we put in the episode, just to do
cool,
that.
Man.
Yeah, man.
That's super cool.
The state of Oregon, as I told you, leads the country in sex trafficked children, and I think this is I don't know what the rest of the world's like. When I talk about where I live and people go, it's worse in Kenya or something, and I go, okay, I don't live there, and so maybe it's not. I don't know. I live here. And I know about here. I know a lot about this place. And one of the things I know about it is that this sickness has been with us since the get-go. Christopher Columbus, we just had Columbus Day a while ago, and I get edgy on that holiday.
We're still calling it that?
Yeah, well, I call it Indigenous Peoples Day, and a lot of people are changing that. But on the books, federally, it's still called Columbus Day. Now, nobody celebrates it. It's not like we're like, hey, what are you guys doing for Columbus Day? You know what I mean? Like,
let's read from his diary.
Yeah.
Right?
And speaking of that, his diary is where he, people don't know this, but he invented child sex trafficking in the Western world. He's the first in the Western Hemisphere, the first sex trafficker was Christopher Columbus. And he wrote instructions in his journal for how his crew members, when he gave them a 10-year-old girl as a bonus for their work, and then to take with them on the way back as a sex slave, he gave them instructions for how to beat them almost into unconsciousness, but not quite, into submission to their sexual advances, but not to where you killed them or knocked them out entirely. And you can just read these instructions, right? It's a guy named Miguel Cuerno that wrote about this. And sorry for the listeners and for you to be so blunt, but this is a thing that I've been sort of tracking for a while. And as a person who experienced a great deal of sexual abuse in my own childhood, there's a sickness here of consuming the innocence of children, of looking at the next generation and not seeing it filled with hope, and not seeing it as our future, and not seeing it as our inheritance, and not seeing it as our hope, but wanting to devour all of that. And again, I don't know what causes it. I don't know what makes it manifest. I know that it goes beyond just that this guy over here is a pedophile and is ill. I believe this is a cultural sickness. And I think it's been with us since the founding of this nation, since the quote-unquote discovery of this place. Because as far as we know, indigenous people had lots of problems and warfare and treachery and violence and stuff. One of the things they didn't do was this. This is something that Europeans introduced to this part of the world. And it's something we've been fighting ever since, right? And I think two things that make me pleased is that that you said yes to that, right? And that it sparks conversations like this. This is an issue that strikes very close to home for this show and for the people that work on it. As I was telling you, for a lot of reasons, all of our families here have been affected by this. And this is a very powerful and very ugly, but also a very beautiful thing that you've done. So thank you for that, man.
And my goodness, we shouldn't have to apologize for this kind of bluntness, right? I mean, we need to have this kind of honesty for this greatest of all possible evils that I can imagine. We have to be able to talk about these things.
Jesus gave a lot of instructions, and one of them was his clear instructions about harming children. This is something he spoke very, very clearly and harshly about. He didn't speak a lot about, if you do this, you're going to suffer. He was a gateless kind of guy, right? He was more interested in what the blessing that was available to people through following his teachings. But this was a place where he would talk about, hey, by the way, you harm children. Guess what's coming for you, buddy? You know what I mean?
Yeah, man, he had harsh words. And then he also showed this beautiful, like you've got his disciples saying, hey, here come the kids and they want to sit on Jesus' lap. Don't bug him. Stay away, kids.
Yeah, exactly.
And, hey, sorry, Lord, the kids. And he's like, what, you guys, what are you talking
about? You bother me.
Yeah, he's like, no, unless you come to me like a little child. Right? So, yeah, those are beautiful, beautiful pictures throughout the scripture. Yeah, for sure.
Well, we're going to get that song on now. Thank you so much, man, for writing it.
Thanks,
Thank you for being here. You're listening to On the Block Radio, folks. This is your host, Andy Gurvich. Our guest, John Voelz. We're going to go to break. You're going to hear the song Name, a few other things, and we're going to come back and finish up, talk about a few of your books, talk about some more of your albums and what's going on.
Thanks,
next.
man.
You got it. We'll be right back after these words.
They tried to name me, tried to make me something that I'm not, and they tried to claim me as if I was something that could be abused, used and bought. They tried to mark me. I won't lie, they left me scarred, broken, marred. But I'm learning I am lovely, and that these are scars are telling stories of what I'm not and what I'm becoming. Who I am. I have a name, it's not the one you tried to hang on me and curse me damned. They can't hang a name on me like a tag that bears a price. I am the price. I am the price. If you listen listen closely. You can hear me in the midst of noise, a sea of voices crying out for dignity. Do you know me? I'm your sister, brother, baby, child, faces painted in eternity. And we're becoming, screaming out, I am. I have a name, it's not the one you tried to hang on me and curse me down. They can't hang a name on me like a tag that bears a price. I am the price. I am the price. I've heard of roses known by any other name, smelling sweet. You'll find us buried in the thorns. We are becoming, screaming out, I am. We have a name, it's not the one you tried to hang on us and curse us down. They can't hang a name on us like a tag that bears a price. We are the price.
So you're an artist, the teacher said. Well, yeah, but really the new term is creative. Great. I've seen your work. It looks great. Great use of space. Let me ask you, what kind of an artist are you? Well, I'm inventive. Oh, so you make things from nothing that nobody else is doing? Yeah. You feel good about that? Yeah, pretty good. Well, let me ask you this. If you were to lose your arms and you couldn't play music anymore, what would you do? Oh, well, I'd sing. And if you lost your singing voice, what would you do? Oh, I'd drop a rhyme, you know? I'd be a poet. Well, what if you couldn't speak anymore at all? Well, I think I'd kick a drum. I'd dance around. I'd do something. Why are you asking me this? I don't know what you're getting at. Well, because you still haven't answered my question. What kind of an artist are you? Why do you make art? Oh, that's easy. Because beauty isn't readily seen, because somebody needs to stand in the gap, because somebody needs to call BS. I was hoping you'd say that, because the world needs more prophets. Prophet? What are you talking about? What, Benny Hinn? Gandalf? Lady from the Matrix movies? Well, the teacher, amused, sat with his sketch pad, drawing furiously. His pencil was moving, and it was so loud in the otherwise deafening room. And the student just looked on. What are you drawing? And the teacher set down his sketch pad, and the student couldn't believe what he saw. Right there on the sketch pad was something in no time at all. It was brilliant, and there was a landscape, and there was a railroad going right through the center of it, and there was a locomotive that was moving at breakneck speed, and it was headed toward danger. And the student knew this. It knew it was moving because it was alive. It became real. He couldn't believe what he saw, so he rubbed his eyes, and he looked again, and the drawing was gone. Am I going crazy? He thought. Did anybody else see this? Am I the only one that saw what was on that sketch pad? Yes, you are, said the teacher. And that's exactly why I need you. But you do realize that you are that train? I thought maybe that was the case. How did you know I was thinking that? Because all of my students get that look on their face when they realize that they've been lying to themselves. I know I made you mad, but remember, I'm an artist too, the teacher said. Hey, let's do something. So he took the sketch pad out and he drew the outline of a man, and above the man he wrote the word religiosity, and he handed it over to the student. Here, finish this. The student was excited, and he grabbed a bunch of paint brushes and paints, and smell of turpentine was in the air, and he said, I have something to say about religiosity. I'm gonna say it in brilliant color. And then he paused and said, wait, that would be overkill. I mean, it's only a sketch. So, feeling proud of himself and a bit snarky, he grabbed a pencil and he drew a 3-piece suit on the man, and he said, there you go. And the teacher said, religiosity, really? That's what you want to say, 3-piece suit? Yes, sometimes it is. That's exactly what I want to say. And he thought, that wouldn't be right. And the teacher said, what are we going to do about this man in the 3-piece suit? Are we going to point at him? Are we going to laugh at him? Are we going to give him the finger? No, the student said, we need to redeem him. So he grabbed his pencil again and he drew underwear on the outside of the man's pants, and he put a cape on him. And above the word religiosity, he wrote the word captain. And the teacher loved it. Captain Religiosity, tell me about this guy. He sounds great. Well, he stands in the gap and he says what needs to be said. Yeah, go on. He sounds like a great guy. And people love him. I mean, he's endearing. Whoa. Hold on a second. You might want to change that part of his backstory. And then the student said, well, you're right. Obviously, Nathan stood in front of a king and humiliated him. Hosea married a prostitute. Ezekiel lay down his side and made bread over burning poo. Yeah, not everybody likes the prophet. Some hate them. They piss people off. So the teacher grabbed the piece of paper and he crumpled it up and he threw it in the trash. What are you doing? The student said, people need to know this guy. He's awesome. People don't need to know this guy. Look, the prophet can't separate who he or she is from the place that they live and the people that they do life with. Not everybody needs to know this guy. They need to know them. The student said, but wait, we need a perfect example of what the artist prophet is. I mean, after all, if we don't, everybody's going to try to change him. The teacher said, the threat to the artist prophet is not people trying to change him. It's cowardice. Sometimes the artist forgets what he or she is supposed to do. Sometimes they forget what I've called them to. Sometimes they need to wake up because they're sleeping.
Down on empty streets, all she can see are the dreams all made solid, are the dreams made real. All of the buildings, all of the cars were once just a dream in somebody's head. She pictures the broken glass, pictures the steam, she pictures the soul with no leak at the seams. Take the boat out, wait until darkness. Let's take the boat out, wait until darkness comes. Nowhere in the corridors of pale green and grey, nowhere in the suburbs in the cold light of day. There in the midst of it, so alive and alone, words support like bone, dreaming of Mercy Street, where you're inside out, dreaming of mercy, in your daddy's arms again, dreaming of Mercy Street. Swear all the secret things in a warm velvet box. To the priest, he's the doctor, he can handle the shocks. Dreaming of the tenderness that tremble in the hips of kissing Mary's lips. Dreaming of Mercy Street, where you're inside out, dreaming of mercy in your daddy's arms again. Dreaming of Mercy Street, it's where they moved that sign, looking for mercy in your daddy's arms. I'm with the father, he's out in the boat, riding the water, riding the waves on the sea.
Hello, my name is Wendy Froud, the mother of Yoda, and you're listening to On the Block Radio.
All right, welcome back to the show, folks. Your host, Andy Gurvich here. We're talking with Pastor John Voelz, among other things, man. I want to ask you a little bit. There's so much. I wish we had 100 hours to talk, and we'll just have to have you back on at some point. You know, we'll do a phone interview or something, man.
Sure.
But I want to ask you about your productivity. You know, when I knew you, you were just cranking CDs out left and right. So you've been a working musician for a lot of years, and I'll ask you about that first, and then maybe the books you've been writing. Where are you at musically, and what's going on with the writing?
Yeah, so musically, I'm still writing a lot of songs, and I look forward to doing some more solo projects and recording those things. But most of my time musically, I think, is best spent these days playing in coffee shops and bars. Being out there with people and having conversations. I love music, period. Like, just to make music, just to share music is beautiful, but it becomes otherworldly for me when I get to have conversation with people,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been my biggest thrill with music these days. And then writing.
How many CDs do you have out?
I think 8.
8, a couple live ones, the best of, then mostly original material. Is there a worship CD as well?
It's all original material because I
knew most of it was, and I didn't know if you had done one, like a live one, that like the church one, that was all original too.
It was all original,
cool.
Because
copyright.
there's copyright and royalty things you have to consider, and if you don't want to throw money at that, which those people are well deserving. If you want to cover their songs, I believe in paying somebody what they're due. But
absolutely.
But when you have a group, when you have a community of songwriters who can create something in indigenous music. I think so. There's a philosophical thing for me as well as just the monetary thing.
We've talked about this a lot, so talk about that, because I think this is an important concept when you talk about indigenous ministry.
Yeah.
People might not, but my audience is going to immediately think that you mean trying to turn Indians into Christians. You know what I mean? As indigenous ministry. Right? Which, by the way, a lot of Indians like being Christians. So that's their bag, baby. Then go for it. Yeah.
That is not what happens. Oh my goodness!
I can already see the hate mail coming in.
Exactly.
I'll just right on to you.
Please
man.
Don't give my email
That's
address.
John Voelz on Facebook.com. I'm kidding. Oh man.
Oh, no. Yeah. So let me give some context.
So what you're saying is you're against standing rock. No, no, go ahead.
Oh, what a sad story. What a sad story. Yeah, no, please. No, so what I mean by that, to give us context, is I just believe you can't separate who you are from where you live. And I believe as a Jesus follower and would you call me a professional Christian?
Yeah.
Is that what you call me? Okay, yeah. So as that guy.
Again, that wasn't meant as a dick.
I know it wasn't, man. I know it wasn't. I'm laughing with you. You can say anything to me. You're not going to offend me, man. Offense is taken, right?
I was more nervous at the beginning of this interview than anyone I've ever done. It was funny. It took me a few minutes to get into but go for it.
No, that's hilarious. No, I just believe that if what I'm doing is going to matter at all, it has to be birthed out of my own community and in our experiences and our stories. That's what's going to matter.
Yeah.
Is not which is interesting because of course I'm appealing to and citing a story that was written thousands of years ago, right? Of a people who weren't
Northern Californians.
Californians, right? So, but to contextualize that story and to recast it, to retell it, to say why it's appropriate, I have to bring it into my own context.
Yeah.
And I have to write songs out of my own story. So there's a big philosophical thing where, sometimes in churches, and I get it, they're well-intentioned. I understand this. I'm not pointing a finger at this, but they'll make an album and they'll do somebody's songs that some other church is singing and wherever. Name your city, your state, and then everybody is singing that song everywhere. And I get it. I think there's some value in that too, like kind of this corporate
thing.
Yeah, like there's something that's universally everybody has gravitated to the song. We're sharing this. I get it. But at the same time,
it's McDonald's church a little bit.
Yeah. At the same time, it feels like an assembly line, and I want, when I'm leading an artist community, I want them in the kitchen. I don't want them eating from the hot lunch church program.
Yeah, right.
And just
microwave burritos. You know what I mean?
Right. And you don't have to be an artist to get hired in a lot of churches now. They don't want artists. They want to know that you can turn out a product and that you know where to find that product, download it, and replicate it. And do it well, but just find it and just, get your skinny jeans
the wheel.
and pull out your guitar and just make it happen. It's like, no. I think that we have a story that is our story that needs to be told, that needs to be extrapolated, that needs to be, I consider myself a miner for stories. It's what I do. I find my people's story. I try to tell that story and retell that story. And so when it comes to recording, that's always been a big deal for me. So there is the monetary concern.
Yeah.
Sure. Even if I really wanted to do somebody's song, there's always that can I afford it thing.
Yeah, right.
But more than that, there's a higher motivation for me, and that's to create, to make good art that resonates with the people.
Have it be a reflection of the moment. Yeah. Reflection of that time, that space, those relationships.
Absolutely, and that gets back to that ethos thing, that believability, authenticity thing. And then,
writing.
I have been writing some books. That's been a fun thing to delve into.
It's amazing. How did the first book come about?
This is crazy, man. So when Twitter first came out, I was at a conference in Nashville, and I was facilitating a discussion, and we thought, hey, it'd be fun for us all to try out this Twitter thing. We didn't know what we were doing, and swapping stories on Twitter, for the 5 people that were listening at that time. It was like we didn't know. But I thought, hey, what if I were to take this Twitter thing and in my group that I'm facilitating, get them all on Twitter, and then we put this on the screen, and then we have a conversation that's going on. Like we use Twitter like a chat room, kind of. We're posting in real time. Whoever the speaker's up there, and everybody's got this conversation going back and forth. And then as I was doing that, I thought, well, I should try this in my church, and I was in Jackson, Michigan at the time, and our gatherings on the weekend, we would change the environment a lot because I think aesthetic is super important, and we happened to be in the round at this time, so we were all facing one another like in a circle, like a campfire setting, 500 people at a time in the round, and we had screens all around the room.
I love this, by the way. We talked about this as a teaching style. I try to use this in the college as well. They talk about moving away from the sage on the stage model and engaging people in this collective, collaborative, participatory experience where you're co-leading, you're co-walking together into this great mystery, as opposed to they just sit there and receive. They participate in the round. It's beautiful. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, so I thought, why don't we do this with our church? We'll teach our church how to get on Twitter, how to navigate this whole new technology, and then we'll have this conversation on the weekends. And people, it was funny because people are like, okay, well, how do we filter it? Because there's other people that are going to be participating, on the World Wide Web.
Yeah, they're going to find this.
They're going to be watching this church service live in real time. We were live streaming at that time. And then they're going to go, well, hey, I got something to say on Twitter. And I was like, don't worry. Well, I was like, hey, let's not worry about it. Let's take it. Actually, I think that'll be part of the beauty of it. And I understand that not every church context is built for that kind of thing. We had created that space.
Right.
And of course we did get weird things, it'd be like, turn to Romans, and it would pop up on the screen and be like, Jesus is the Easter bunny, and it'd be like, oh, okay. Thanks, Mike from Cincinnati.
Exactly. So, the guy's like, he's in his underwear, like just loving
exactly,
it.
cheesy puff dust on his chest. He's like, I don't, and I'm not making fun of you, Mike, if you're listening.
It's John Voelz at Facebook.com, Mike.
No, but so we created this environment. Well, what ended up happening is people started writing about it. I actually had some people react against it, and it created this conversation on the web, and Time magazine of all entities hears about what's happening in Jackson, Michigan. So they called me and they said, we'd like to do an article on what you're calling Twitter Church. And so it was funny, was the Time magazine, it was the issue with Michelle Obama on the cover.
Nice.
And there was an article on me and my buddies and our church and what we were doing with Twitter. And then a publisher, sorry, this story is so long,
great, man.
But this is how we got here. A publisher, Abingdon Press, was looking to see, is anybody in church ministry using social media or networking in any capacity?
Kind of way,
and they said, and I got a call from them. They
read the Time article. Yeah.
Well, they read that, and then they said, and then every time we Google this, we come up with your name.
Cool.
Would you be interested in writing a book? And so that was my first book that was published. It was.
Had you never considered writing a book before? Where you was this another one of those just say yes to the thing and then you go, I don't know how to do this?
I had considered it, but I wasn't positioning myself to do that at that time. Yeah. So it definitely was one of those moments where I said, yes, okay, walk through that door. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so I wrote that book. It was called Follow You, Follow Me. And then I had a continued conversation with them, and they said, hey, we like your voice, because I tend to write, not so much with that book, but even that book, I tend to write more Rolling Stone than Christianity Today. It was, and they were like, we like your style, your voice. Would you consider writing a leadership book? And I said, well, I actually, there's a lot in me that reacts against that whole leadership cult, whole, 7 steps to, 21 irrefutable laws of,
the 4 stages of
I'm
three.
like, I'm not that guy. And they're like, exactly. That's why we want you to write this leadership book. And I was like, okay, I'll tell our story.
Isn't that a biblical thing, though? You got Moses the stutterer. You got David the sheep boy. It's always like, no, man, not me. Say, not me, not me, not
right.
me. Yeah, you're the guy.
Well, I certainly don't want to equate myself with Moses. But, but it was a...
I mean, just the beard alone.
Right.
That's all I was going for.
Yeah,
anyway, go ahead.
You can Google my picture.
Yeah.
Please don't.
We'll have it on the website. Don't worry.
Okay, great. Can you just find a Brad Pitt photo and put it there instead? We'll just
I'll put Bobby
people go,
Jordan.
wow, there's a remarkable resemblance.
Right. You know what I mean? So the leadership book,
Yeah, so I wrote this book called Quirky Leadership, which is about creating an environment where there's a good deal of permission for people to be innovative and imaginative in their own context in church. And it's funny, man, because as I wrote that too, I look back and I'm like, I don't know if I'd say that exactly like that, but you just roll the dice. You go, this is where I'm at, and this is the best way I know how to say it right now. And you put it out there, and I'm proud. I think it was good. I think it was a good experience. A lot of good things to talk about. But that was the next book. And then I've got a new one coming out that I actually got to write about the Nativity. Called
Christmas book, huh?
Yeah. So it's called The Eyes of the Nativity, and it's coming out this week. Actually, we'll be hearing this episode about Christmas time, right? So hopefully the book's out by that time. But it's about viewing the actual account of the nativity and the actual nativity scene, that plays part in it too. But through the years, through different roles I've had, different hats I've worn. So it's a lot my story, but I'm hoping people see and hear their own story in it. It gives them something to talk about, something to converse about.
One of the things we've been talking about over this weekend, and I'll tell a couple of stories here, and then I'd like you to comment on them, because I think writing and telling stories, you said it's what captivated you. When you were a young age, that woman took you to church and you heard these stories. And we were talking to a friend this weekend, and I told you, I said, when I walked away from the faith, it was because it had become a list of principles for me, like answer in the affirmative to these 15 statements, and now you might be a Christian. You know what I mean? Like, it was just literally a system.
You have to say it with that accent.
A list of 40 things that one had to believe, and if I did, then I was a believer. And the narrative had gone. The story and my connection to it had vaporized at that moment. But we've talked about a couple of things this weekend, and one of the things that sort of brought me back into the sort of the cloud, the mystery of transcendence is narrative. I heard you say that stories stick in ways that bullet points or theological propositions don't necessarily with people. And I talked to you about, because I want to ask you about the move back from Jackson to California, and I talked to you about indigenous cultures, and Joseph Campbell wrote, I won't say Joseph Smith, weird. Joseph Campbell wrote a lot of it, not Joseph Smith. Joseph Campbell wrote a lot. Yeah. Everyone's laughing. Easy. Joseph Campbell wrote about, in The Hero's Journey, this very indigenous idea about when a person hits a certain age, everything that they could learn from the community they were raised in, they've learned. I mean, not everything. When have we learned everything from our parents? My son's like, when I was like 5. But but like you can learn more from the people in your immediate vicinity. But at some point, one has to go out into the world, find an aspect of themselves and some wisdom and some truth and some teachings and something about what they're capable of, and interact with other people and go right on, and then they acquire some kind of profound knowledge and are able to bring it back with them to that original community in a way that they couldn't have done before, right? And so I guess before I get into some of the other stuff about kind of ecumenicism and other religious stories, maybe let's talk about that a little bit, about what brought you, because when I told you that, you said that really resonated with you about you left California because you had sort of hit that point and followed that calling to Jackson, but then a series of events brought you back to California, and that wasn't an easy transition, but it very much lined up with that. Like, you came back with a skill set that you didn't have when you left, and it was a skill set that church needed at the moment. This one in Northern California, the church you started at, right? That you were at.
Yeah. Lakeside, actually, I have a long history there. When my wife and I were first married, my friend Brad Franklin was starting this church in Folsom, and he needed. I had just been introduced to him and heard that he needed a guy to come play guitar at his church. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And there was we were there the second Sunday it was in existence, and there were, I think 15 people there, and now it's a big place. There's over 2,000 people, 30 years later. Wow. It's been an interesting ride, but yeah, I was there for a few years, and then I was on staff for a few years. And I mean, it's a long story, but I got to a spot where I had been on staff for about 7 years and was having conversations about, of all things, art and tension and innovation and imagination and story. And we were having these great conversations. And I just felt like, I had this great respect for my friend Brad. And I just felt like some of the things I wanted to try and delve into, I wasn't going to be able to do there. Not necessarily because I didn't have permission, but it just wasn't the right timing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the right environment. And so I told Brad that, I was going to start looking for something. And he was a great friend back then. He was like, hey, man, I don't want to be the guy to... I want you to stay here, but let's talk about this. Let's pray about this. I want the best for you. I mean, that was super. That was amazing. So yeah, we spent 11 years in Jackson, Michigan, and then and you want me to tell the story about coming back?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. You want me to start with that dream that I told you?
Yeah, do it, man.
It's crazy. So I'm not one of these guys that kind of, trades in the world of dreams and visions. I'm not that guy. Not that I wouldn't put that past God. But I have this crazy dream that I'm sitting with my friend Brad. We're sitting on his back porch and smoking pipes because I collect tobacco pipes.
Mm-hmm.
We're smoking pipes and we're talking about the future. And in this dream, he asked me a bunch of things. We talk and he asked me if I would consider coming back on staff. Well, I wake from this dream and it was so real. I tell my wife and she said, hey, would you ever consider moving back to California? You think that's what's going on? I said, no. Nope. I'm fine. I feel like, we're doing amazing things in this community. I love this community. They love me. We're able to have this ongoing conversation and we're in this dance together. And I don't want to leave this dance. It's great. And then I go visit the church months and months in California. Yeah, I go back to visit, and they asked me to speak. And one night, I'm at Brad's house, and he's like, "Hey, man, you want to go outside and talk for a while?" And I was like, "Yeah." He said, "Did you bring a pipe?" I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Yeah, well, let's go smoke pipes." I'm like, "You don't even smoke a pipe." And he's like, "No, remember you bought me one a few years ago as a gift." And I said, "Okay." So we're sitting out on his porch smoking pipes, and we start talking, and as he's talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is all the stuff from my dream.
Yeah.
Right? And he doesn't ask me to come back, but we have this weird thing where I leave, and my wife looks at me. She had heard the conversation. She's like, "What just happened?"
That was your dream.
That was your dream. She's
ago.
like, "So you think you might want to, is God saying move back to California?" I said, "Absolutely not. That's nope.
No.
That's not what's happening."
Yeah.
And then a little while later, I get this other opportunity to come back there and visit and speak. And one of my buddies at the church is like, "Hey, man, I got this. I don't want this story to get too long, but he's like, I had this weird thing happen, man. I heard you speaking in church," and he was on staff, and he's like, "I had this overwhelming sense that you're going to be back on staff here, and would you think about coming back to California?" "Absolutely not."
No.
But all this stuff starts stacking up throughout these few years, and so I tell this guy who said he heard me speak. I tell him about this crazy dream I had, and then a few months goes by, and I'm feeling weird that I've told him this dream thing, but I never even told Brad, my friend, about it. I'm like, what if Brad hears this and he's going to be like, "How come you never told me about this dream? Why are you going to tell my staff, you're having these dreams about coming back?"
Taking my job.
Right. So I call Brad and I say, "Hey, man, got to tell you the story." I tell him this whole thing. We laugh together. He's like, "I love you, man. If that door ever opened up, but that's not where I'm at right now."
You're like, "Nope." Yeah.
I was like, "Yeah, me neither, man." High five. But then he calls. I'm in Chicago with the team. I get this opportunity to speak at this conference called Story, which is a conference for the creative class, they call it. And I'm with my team there. And I get this call from Brad. And I I go, hey man, I better take this call because Brad only calls when there's an emergency. You know, he's not a phone guy. I say to my buddy, and so I answer the phone. I'm like, hey Brad, what's up, man? And he's like, yeah, hey, I just want to talk for a few minutes. I'm like, is everything okay?
Yeah.
He's like, well, some have to be wrong for me to call.
Yeah,
I'm like,
right.
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. What's going on?
You never call.
And he tells me the story, man. He says that he is on this silent retreat or prayer retreat. You know, he's up in Lake Tahoe, pristine, beautiful. You know, and he's praying and he's saying, God, I really feel like our church needs new creativity and new imagination. You know, new creativity and new ideas and new energy. You know, and he said he just felt this overwhelming sense of, man, it's time to call John, which was a weird. It's an amazing thing to hear, you know, to go. I mean, that feels so neat, right?
Yeah.
You know, that your friend would call and say, "I think you have something to offer here," and so I told him no. I was like, "Yeah, no, I can't come back," you know. And what would that look like anyway? What would I do there? And we committed that we would continue the conversation and pray with one another for as long as it took to get like a final answer, you know. And I know that's a weird thing for some people, you know, and yeah, did God come knocking on my door and show up with a papyrus,
Yeah.
and like, you know, thus saith
Sandals,
me.
yeah.
No.
Drone, you know, you
right.
This echoey.
Right. I'm like, is that John Goodman?
Yeah.
No, but I know it seems
you go like,
weird.
God,
man,
should I go to California? And you hear oakley dokley. Yeah, right. You
right.
go, oh my
Exactly.
gosh, I can't
my
believe.
goodness.
No, okay.
Yeah, my goodness. So, oh my goodness.
So
we do this for quite a few months, man. And honestly, even, you know, as a Jesus follower, it's like, it's like I'm not waiting for lightning and like, well, I'm just going to keep talking to the ceiling until I hear something. Like, I mean, there's a lot of things that play into decision making for me as a Jesus follower. What is wisdom, just wisdom say? You know, like, is this a wise thing? Is it going to ruin my family? What do my trusted friends say that I've invited into my life to edit me? What are they saying about this? And you know what? I believe that the Bible has some things to say. You know, if I read this, is there anything contrary to, you know, I mean, there'd be obvious answers if it was like, you know, oh Lord, do you want me to go work in the porn industry?
Yeah.
But no.
The answer would be yes.
The answer is no. I mean, you know, but then there's some
got
things
that
like
X church, man. We talked about.
Right. But then there's things like, do I move back to California? Well, there's no answer.
Chapter and verse for that.
Right.
Yeah.
But man, we do this thing for months and months and months, and it was a super hard decision. But I felt like the timing was right. Everything, I had changed over 11 years. Brad had changed over 11 years. We were at the spot where our stories aligned, and it seemed like this is a fitting. Not only next chapter, you know, I'm getting old. It might be the end of the story, you know, I don't know. Like, it seems like a good wraparound to this. Like, this is the kind of story that I know, the God I follow, I know he tells. He tells these kinds of stories all the time. And so I got to go back now with this new wisdom. You're talking about this hero's quest and going out, and I totally resonate with all that stuff Campbell's saying about that. Like, there's no way I could have learned some things about compassion and innovation and indigenous ministry. Like, honestly, had I not gone to this other community and then got elbows deep in it.
Yeah.
Sold out. This is my place. I'm buying a house here. These are my people. I love them. These are my stories. It changed me. They changed me. And I feel like that's a beautiful gift they gave me that I get to now go back into this community that I was spawned from. And
bring something
new
from afar.
Yeah. And of course, they get all of my warts and bruises and all of the stuff I do wrong
package.
too.
And you get all of theirs.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's the beautiful thing, man. Or at least that's what I'm hoping to be part of creating, is that kind of community where we can.
The word, the word church is from the Greek ekklesia, which means the community. And I always, I refer to Matthew 5-7, the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount, because he's speaking to a crowd of several thousand people that are not all followers of his, and he gives them all the same instructions. These instructions are not just for his followers, they're sort of for everybody within earshot.
Right. And
it has to do entirely with how they treat one another. And I wanted to ask you about this as we start moving towards the end. Like I said, I could have you on for another hour, but as a professor of world religions, as somebody who's taken these very concepts and then gone to study them in other religions, we've talked while you've been here this weekend about looking to hearing other people's stories, hearing other people's expression of their encounter of the divine, and before we go to the places where we disagree with it, before we can go to I talked about like when Lauryn Hill was on back in the day, and I showed it to some Christian friends, and they were like, she's a Rastafarian, that's not the real God, and I was like, well, before we get to that, what I mean?
She's crying, she's cutting herself
she's on MTV,
open,
ripped apart,
pain.
singing to the God, and we're like, she smoked weed beforehand, so it's all worthless, you know what I mean? And it's like, hang on a second. And so I think there's some power, and we talked about reincarnation today for a little bit, and I talked about the 3 or 4 ways that somebody who is a Christ follower can think about that concept without altering any of Orthodox Christian belief, right? Thinking about it philosophically, thinking about it in terms of the physicality of your body, the elements of your body. The magnesium in my body used to be in a dolphin, used to be in a giraffe, used to be in a tree, used to be in a guy named Tony, like literally. And so in that sense, all of the physicality of who we are is always just churning in and out of ourselves and into each other, and our skin is a membrane that's constantly letting us, even that which we call us, it immediately just flickers into the air, so in that sense we can understand what that means, in the sense of we go to sleep and wake up a new person each day with a new opportunity each day, right? If I was harmful to my children yesterday or my wife, or if I was a bad teacher, the implications of that, they would call it karma. But if you've harmed a relationship, it's not like in the next day it's fine again, but you have a new opportunity the next day to make it's a rebirth, right? And so a lot of these kinds of things all are things we can accept, even if we're part of a Christ-following tradition. Now, the fact that I have this little seed, this little soul packet that when I die just gets transported into another human body, and that Andy soul moves from body to body through time. That's something that probably most people in the Christian church are like, okay, when we get to that point, I'm not that
right.
It's appointed to man death and then judgment, right? And so at least in my tradition, that's not what's up. But if reincarnation means 7 things, 4 of them Christians can actually agree with without altering anything in their theology. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that the word God for a lot of our listeners means a lot of different things. And
yes, certainly, of course.
And for some of them, it's they have a version of this word they can embrace. For some of them, this is a word they're terrified of.
Understandably.
Yeah, and I made a commitment, especially after this election season, to start bringing people on the program that represent views that are afield from what the audience of this show normally is used to. And I want to do that on purpose to start forcing us into these uncomfortable spots, to start cross-pollinating a little bit. And in the Hindu tradition, the word God, there's to practice Hinduism, you practice one of the yogas. And yoga just means to be yoked together. It's the same word as to be yoked, right? To be bound to something, right? And it's a discipline. It's the spiritual discipline. In the practice of this tradition, you practice one of these spiritual disciplines as a means to transformation.
Sure, kind of this mutual submission to one another too, right? You got to work this field together when you're yoked.
Absolutely.
Right.
And the bhakti is the word that means loving kindness. And in bhakti yoga, that's not a yoga that's based on like putting your leg behind your head and stuff, you know what I mean? It has nothing to do with positions.
The kind I will never do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Bhakti yoga is a yoga of love. And so how do you practice this yoga? You practice it through doing acts of love in the world, and then meditating on how every act of love holds within it the two things. It says something to you about God's love for you, and then it says something to you about your love for God. Every act of love. So your love for Father says something to you about your love for God and God's love for you, but so does your love for mother. Your love for child says something to you about your love for God and God's love for you. Your love for neighbor, your love for pet, your love for enemies, your love for food, your love for sex, your love for art, all of these things. There is no act of love, and even the scripture says God is love, right? And so every act of loving kindness is a divine act. And there's a woman who goes to I'm going to do the joke again. She goes to a yogi, and then she goes to a boo-boo. I'm kidding. Sorry. I can't get over it. But she goes to a yogi. My son's here, and he's not laughing at all. That's a fucking brilliant joke. I don't know why you don't laugh at that. But she goes to a yogi, and she says, I don't believe in God. And he goes, well, he starts telling her about love and love of other, right? And she goes, I don't really, I think people suck. And he goes, there must be somebody you love. And she goes, my brother has a kid, and I'm like his godparent, which is funny because he's like, I don't believe in God, but, and I love this kid. And the yogi goes, start there. Like, start there, right? And I heard you talk about the role you have in church is each week we want to take a step towards God, right? And so he doesn't say to this woman, go worship your godson. Go, your brother's kid is God, so just go start praying to him. He says, start there. Yeah. Right? You have walled yourself off from the world for whatever reasons. You might maybe a lot of pain, maybe a lot of mistrust, maybe whatever, and you find it impossible or very difficult to love. And if you find it impossible to love other, then you're not going to have anything to do with God. And she goes, but I love my brother's son. And he goes, start there. That's a crack. That's a way to get out of yourself. That's a way to get into other. And that's little o other. But in the expression of, in a million little acts of loving the little o other, you'll start learning how to love the big O other, right? Wow. Because what God is other than you, right? Yeah, and so by investing in other, by horizontally exploding love into the world, right? And this is, again, in the book of Revelation, right? Like, when did we do that to you? When did we not feed you, right? As you did to the least of these, you done to me. And so there's an element of this same teaching, right, in the scripture, right? It's just framed differently than it is in Hinduism, but it actually means the same thing. We show our love for God, as in the book of James, by how we show our love to one another. This is the primary way we show our love for God. That's a very Hebraic concept, by the way. The horizontal love, the protecting and helping and healing the community, feeding widows and orphans, mentioned 1,100 times in the scripture. Right? No ancient religion even cared about this, in the ancient Mediterranean, right? We're talking about in that pocket of the world. And so I guess the question in all of that to you is, without having to embrace bhakti, yoga, and all these other kinds of things, right? I'm just bringing that up as a corollary. I feel a lot of that in the way you were, we've talked about God a lot through this conversation, but then I hear you, when you talk about it in the day-to-day and how your feet go on the ground, you start talking about helping a little girl with a poem about her father who's in prison, right? And these kinds of things. And so when the rubber hits the road, the actual expression of that faith is manifested in acts of love to people.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And I see that as a cornerstone of your understanding of your role as a Christian and as a pastor. Am I right in that?
It's huge. Yeah, absolutely. I try to start each day by asking the question, what is God doing? And of course, I understand my understanding of God, and I am unapologetically, a follower of Jesus, and I appeal to the wisdom of the Christian scripture, both Old and New Testament, which also belongs to, the Old Jewish Testament belonged to the Jewish people. Of course, I don't apologize for that. But so give me grace. As you should. I hope anybody who's listening gives me grace to say, this is my framework. And I wake up every day and I say, God, what are you doing in my world? And how can I get on board with that? Yeah. Which requires me to pay attention to people and to what's happening around and to experience new things and to listen to people. I can learn something from the yogi as a Jesus follower. Yeah. Now, that scares a lot of people in my camp, right? But I can learn something from him. I think he can learn something from me too. Yeah. But it's like, that's a beautiful place to be at. I believe the God I believe in, I believe that he has a corner on all truth.
Mm-hmm.
All truth belongs to him. So this yogi, or boo-boo, this yogi bears the image of God, as far as I understand, from the Christian scriptures, bears the image of the one who made him. That counts for something.
Yeah.
Like and if truth comes out of his mouth, and and it's the kind of truth, and I somehow measure that by, does it conflict with not my conventional wisdom, but what I know and understand in the scripture and the way people are and humanity and love for people. If that's God's truth. Like if it doesn't matter who it comes from.
There's a powerful story. Go finish and then I'll. Yeah.
Well, so this affects everything for me and gets me in trouble with people, because then this, like, I don't even have divisions of secular and sacred in my mind either in the church world, which is bothersome for some people. So if we do a piece of music in church, somebody might be upset and say, well, that's a secular artist that did that.
Yeah.
I go, whoa. When did we start judging a piece of music as good or bad or helpful or whatever the case is, based on what that person's intent may have been based on their worldview that we think it is? You know what I mean? It just gets so weird to me. So I think if a song is good, it's a good song, period. It doesn't matter where it came from, which I understand is risky business in my world sometimes, but I think we desperately need to do it. So I do those things not just to push the envelope and make religious people mad, but because, partly that sometimes probably, if I'm honest, but I do it because I think there's a conversation that needs to be had.
Dude, there's a pretty profound and revolutionary thing that happens when one genuinely, and this is hard, and we all don't do it, and I don't do it. I'm a selfish person a lot of the times. But when we genuinely put other in front of ourselves, when you genuinely do it, right? Like this a really profound, this is in Hindu and Buddhist circles, this is called the Bodhisattva, but I would argue that Christ is a Bodhisattva as well,
which is also a Steely Dan song.
Yeah, a very good one, right? But greater love has known than this, that when a man lays his life down for his friend. The God of your religion is a God who sort of shows this very concept of, like, let me show you what it is to live for someone else besides yourself, right? Let me show you what it is to give everything for someone else's suffering, right? Like even your own safety, even your own body, even your own life, like your own life. And I told you the story earlier about the Mahabharata, one of the two great Hindu epics, and it's about a war between the two sections of a family, and the sort of evil cousins take over the land where this family, where they're living, and the rightful half of the family that should be the rulers, they kind of steal it from them and then banish them into the wilderness, and they come back and ask for the land back, and they don't get it back, and it leads to this impending conflict. And the good guys are in the right. They're encouraged by the gods to go through with this, but the leader, Arjuna, doesn't want to, because he looks over the battlefield and sees that everybody out there is his family, and he goes, tomorrow in this battle I'm going to lose people that I love and people that are my family. And let me hit the pause button there real quick. If we believe the biblical notion of Adam and Eve, then everybody in the world is related to one another, because they all come from the same two people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they're all when we say the human family, we're not being like kumbaya metaphorical. We mean the human family. We're not just one species. We're one family. Now here's where it gets weird. Even if you don't believe the biblical story, that's still true, right? Genetic science has actually proven this to be true as well. Right. So genetics have identified a mitochondrial Eve and Adam, and this is they locate it.
And the writers of the reimagined Battlestar Galactica, by the way,
knew this as well. Yeah. And they locate these two people in the Rift Valley of Africa 175,000 years ago. So those details, depending on the way one might read the Bible in the book of Genesis, might conflict, but science has confirmed that everybody on this planet comes from the same two people. So every war is a war between family. Every conflict is a conflict between family, and that's true. That's not a metaphor, right? And so but the gods tell Arjuna, you have to go through with this because your cousins have done something evil, and the society's out of balance now. We can't let evil just rule, right? It has to be brought back into balance. So they go through with the war. They win, but the death toll is horrendous. And the good guys who've won, who were right in fighting the war, who end up winning, who have the support of the gods, they are still so devastated by what's happened. They're still so broken by what's happened that they wander off into the wilderness to die. They don't go back and assume the rule. They just go, this was too painful. We're going to go die, right, out of depression and sadness, right? And one by one, as they're just walking off into the wilderness, like that penguin in Herzog's Until the End of the World, you know what I mean? Just wandering off to die, man. Just, they die. They just drop one after the next after the next. And the guy, Yudhisthira is his name, who's the one that got him into this trouble in the first place because he played a dice game for the control of the kingdom with his crooked cousins, and they cheated. So it was all kind of his fault to begin with. He's the last one alive, and he gets right to the gates of paradise, right to the gates of heaven. And they go, and he's got a dog with him. And they go, hey, come on in, but the dog has to stay, right? And the dog stays. And he goes, if the dog doesn't come in, I don't come in, right? So this is where all dogs go to heaven come from, but the Hindu version, right?
Right.
But and so then the dog turns into this god Yama, who is the god of justice. And then they say, oh, we were testing you. Just come on in, right? So then he goes into heaven, and when he gets in there, it's filled with all of the bad guys, all the dead people from the evil cousins, right? They're all there, but none of his family, nobody else's, right? And so he looks around, and it's all these like evil people, right? And he goes, well, if this is what heaven is, then if then I don't want to be here, right? Because this is not for me. If the righteous aren't here, then I don't want to be here either, right? I don't want to be in some eternal party with shitheads, with people that lived their life stealing from others and taking from others, just because now I get to be in this country club in the sky forever with them. I don't want to be here. And so he rejects paradise because of that, right? And they go, we were testing you again, right? And so in the Hindu system, you can't want paradise too much. And it's a really interesting thing, because I equate it to my understanding of Christianity because here, and then I want to get your comments on it, and then I have two more questions for you, and we're going to let you out here.
No, this is great, man.
I have found often in the church, and again, this is not a criticism across the board, but that there are those who are kind of hungry for the fight. And what I mean by that is once God's enemy is identified, and whether that be, the Buddhist or the gays or the vegetarians or the witches or the whatever, then there's this like, oh, we want you to repent. But if you don't do that pretty quickly, and then we're going to burn, you know what I mean? We want to get to the, right. We're going to burn, right? And there's this like, there's almost a kind of, joy is not the word, but there's the suffering of those people in eternal torment will justify my faith too. See, I was right. You should have listened to me, kind of thing, and come to the Lord. And I've always thought that, this story about Yudhisthira, the Bodhisattva story that says, as long as there's a suffering soul out here, I don't want to go to paradise. I want to go find this suffering soul and help them. And there's still suffering in the world. Don't take me to heaven. And I found this. I think there's instruction here just in these. We talked about ethos before, right? Or ethos, right? Of our accountability, of our credibility, of our transparency. There's something here for the church to learn what it is. I call it Abraham versus Jonah, right? To not sit on a hill with our arms folded, waiting for God to come judge the wicked, but to plead with God, give them more time, right? The Jesus thing, forgive them, they know not what they do, right? Like, as long as they're suffering people, let me draw breath, and so I can be a bridge for them to healing and transcendence, as opposed to, when are you going to make them pay, Lord? You know what I mean? And I understand that smote my enemies kind of vibe too. I get.
When are you going to make that guy pay? That guy that I was 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, 10 minutes ago, or 30 seconds ago, or 10 years ago.
Sure.
You know what I mean? We are that, right? And so. I guess maybe what do you think about that, right? About what I'm saying about how, if maybe Christians can't learn theology from Hindus, but one thing they might be able to learn are things like this, like what is it to be sold out to this idea of wanting healing for the other more than I want even for my own life. I told that story about one of the last times I preached about those people in the Special Olympics. Right, in the 100-yard dash, and somebody fell down, and they turned around and picked them up and walked to the finish line together. That happened again yesterday. I was watching the news last night. Did you see that? It was on a high school track meet, and it was a girl. It was a cross country deal, and it was right at the finish line. And this girl hit this. Ran the whole 15 miles or whatever. Gets 20 yards from the thing and collapses and tries to stand up, and the rubbery legs where she would just take one step and then just down, and then stand up again and then just down, right? And you can't touch her, or else she gets disqualified, right? But she can't stand up, and she's trying to crawl, and it just collapse, right? And this other runner, this senior girl, comes up, picks her up, right, and wraps her up, and I'm getting emotional thinking about it, and goes, I got you, and carries her over the finish line. Both of them were disqualified. What? The girl that helped her was like, I'll give up my spot in heaven.
You're right.
To help this girl get across the line. You know what I mean? And it's like, holy shit, man. Like, to me, that's what I want to be, and that's what I want to see in the world.
Wow.
Help me out here. Is there a question in that? I always do this. I talk for an hour, and then I go, I think I'm asking you something. But what is it? Yeah.
My host today, or my guest today is Andy Gurevich.
Yeah, exactly. This thing hasn't been on for 20 minutes anyway.
No,
so yeah.
Dude, I'm joking with you, man. I love you. Love you so much, man. Dude,
Anyway, very profound. We got to go. Yeah. But
to answer my question.
Yeah, no.
No, sure. Dude.
Yeah. I love you, man.
I love you, man. That's, man. Well, you said quite a few profound things in there. You said something about maybe we can't learn theology from the Hindu, and I totally get what you were saying, and I also think you're going to agree with me on this next thing. Is that, and before I should say, I don't want to receive any emails, hate mail from my Jesus following friends. Hear me out on this. I think we can learn theology.
I think so too. I was trying to water it down a little bit.
Yeah, totally, and I appreciate that. The deal is that there's a theology that is like the stuff I know about God, the stuff I can find out about God from the written word kind of thing, God's people. There's that kind of cognitive knowing God kind of theology, and then there's a piece of theology it's the how then shall we live kind of piece of theology. It's like, okay, so what do I do with that?
Right.
And it's all the relationship, love, people thing. So I hear a story like that and I go, wow, what can I learn from that as a Jesus follower? What can my friends learn? A ton. Are you kidding me? There's, I grew up in this economy in the beginning of my Jesus following, even with those people that I absolutely love. There was, part of that brand was kind of this it's all going to burn mentality, right? That we're going to escape from here one day and then be in paradise, where God dries every tear. And I believe that. I believe there's a finality, and I do believe that there's a new heaven and new earth, and I actually believe that stuff. And I also believe that when I was a kid and I was a painting contractor's son, and I didn't know any better, and I'm like pouring latex and thinner and stuff into the ground, when I'm painting a house, that I can't, how wrong for me to have that, turn or burn. I mean, not turn or burn, but it's all going to burn.
It's all going to burn.
The other one too, but it's all going to burn mentality. I mean, oh my goodness, this is God's creation. I have a role in creation care. I have
stewardship.
Stewardship is a huge thing in Scripture, and so so I hear stories like that, about heaven and giving up paradise for something. And I go, there's a lot of talking points here for me and my Jesus following friends in my congregation. Anybody who wants to listen to what I have to say about what I think the Bible says about these things, I say, oh my goodness, there is a big part of following Jesus. I think that means that I don't want to get too far off base, but the concept of sin, for me, there's a guy by the name of N.T. Wright. I think this is where I heard this the first time. He said, the best way to understand sin is not as the rule you broke.
Yeah.
it's the breaking of relationship. It's breaking of relationship with God, breaking of relationship with one another, with the world, right? And with ourselves.
Yeah.
When I start understanding sin or thinking about sin in that way, I go, oh my goodness, this multi-way, four-way brokenness. Like, I can wrap my head around that. And so many of my friends who aren't Jesus followers understand that. They understand brokenness. They understand that they don't want to be shamed any longer. You know, they get that. And now all of a sudden, we have something that we can talk about, and like creation care and all of those things fit firmly into that whole construct. And there's room in there that does not in any way take
undercut
power away from or undercut or overshadow or eclipse anything that I believe God is saying through His Scripture. Nothing at all. And there's a lot of conversations to have with people when I think that's been a really helpful thing for me. So can I learn something from that guy? Can I learn theology? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Heck,
one of the things that guy will teach you is this, and then I'll get to my final two questions for you. Hindus believe in, if you go to, first of all, it's not one religion. This is something the British invented the term Hinduism. When you go to India and talk to the people that practice these things there, because there's Christians and Muslims and Buddhists and in India too, but when you find people that practice this other thing, and you ask, and it varies from village to village, and the beliefs can be very different and even contradictory, and so there's not really one system at all. But when you ask them what they practice, they say they practice a thing called the Sanatan Dharma, which means the ageless or eternal way, is what they call it. And sure enough, as archaeologists explain it, people come out of Africa, out of our two parents, 175,000 years ago in the Rift Valley. They come up through northern Africa and turn to the right and go into southern India, right? And then if you're not African, so if you can't trace your descent directly to Africa, right? Everybody listening to this program, everybody in your church, if my ancestors came from Nigeria, 50 years ago, right? If they can't say that, then you're from southern India, period. Everybody on this planet, right? And so the religion practice there at that time period is pretty significant. And when they say they have 330 million gods and counting, which they do, 330 million gods, right? More gods in India than people in the United States. And you go, that's ridiculous, right? You can name them all. And well, they can't, right? Some of them are only worshipped by one family in one village, right? But they go, by the way, there's only one God, right? These other gods aren't gods. These other gods are aspects, right? And so in Christianity, we would call these the attributes of God, right? And so, we talk about God's judgment, right? Well, in Hinduism, that's called Shiva. That's all it is, right? It's just another deity. And when you go, wait a minute, you guys are polytheists, they explain it like this. And again, I think there's something here for Christians, even if they don't do it just like Hindus do. They go, how many people are on the planet? Well, 7 billion, right? How many, 7, 8 billion? How many people have ever lived? Right? And that's a lot of billions, right? There's billions and billions and billions of people that have lived, right? Show me two of them that are exactly alike in every way, even identical twins. You'll never have two people that are exactly alike, right? And we have billions of humans, and all of them contain and human is a finite concept. To be human is a created finite thing, and yet all of the expressions of humanity, billions and billions and billions and billions, and no two of them are exactly alike. And so the creative potential of humanity. And no one is that, and you're not more human than me, and that lady over there is not less human than me. You know what I mean? They all bear this mark, the same. They all are absolute manifestation of it, and they are all completely unique. And if we can say that about a finite concept like a human, then when we go to the divine, how many ways can God express Himself? Do we get to a limit at some point where God is only these 7 things, right? Of course, if it's limited, it's not the deity. And so if we can have billions of manifestations of the human expression, then we can have far more of the divine, right? Of the various ways the one God expresses itself, manifests itself. And so it's It's an interesting way to think about it, right? Because it takes it away from these sort of literal, like there's up in the sky, there's 300 million dudes with blue skin and funny hats on, and 4 arms smashing into each other.
Right.
If you take that too literally, then yeah, people who are Christ followers are like, I don't believe that, right? But if you leave it in this sort of these mysteries that have been with us since we've been people, and like you said, indigenous religion in various cultures, it may be. And I know you can't go too far on this, but maybe it manifests itself in a way at a time or in a part in the world that might contain vast amounts of truth, even if it contains these other cultural things that might water the message down or make it not fully accessible for someone from a Judeo-Christian background. So I'm not pushing this idea. I mean, I do believe in ecumenicism, which is a word of when at all possible, we find common ground together for the betterment of humanity when at all possible, right? And with full awareness of that it's not always going to be possible, but we start there and we exhaust all of the ways of possible bridges to one another. And then once those are exhausted, then we can recognize the differences. But by the way, those differences don't necessarily have to be scary. Allah says in the Quran, I made you into different nations so that you may know one another.
Know each other, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty profound.
I had a professor in Bible college give me an assignment to visit churches outside of my, own experience.
Yeah.
And you had to write papers for each of these experiences, and you could only ask one question, and then write this paper. And the question was, "What do I have in common with these people?"
Wow.
Which has changed the way that I view any church experience, right? You go in, you start saying, what do I have in common with these people? Whatever it is. To be quite frank, even if it's not a church of the Christian tradition, if it's a community I'm asked to be part of that is not part of the Christian tradition at all, I still ask, what do I have in common with these people? And when I exhaust those things, I give myself permission to go, okay, well, how does this jive with my own worldview? With what I understand. But by that time, I'm in such I have worked myself down off the proverbial ledge. Never that I'm worked up, really.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? You don't allow yourself to go in with guns blazing.
And I think there's a second question, so we don't try to recreate everything in our own image, right? So after that question of what do I have in common with these people, the next question is, of the differences, which of them do I not have to be worried about? Which of them can I embrace or be fine with or allow or be happy about?
Sure.
And that might take another 40% of it out of the way. And then you might be left with 2-3 things that
right.
You go, well, on these 3 things, I don't jive with that person.
Right. And then you, right. Like, what do I need to know? To be cool with God is I don't know if that's the best way to ask that question, but like, you look at the thief on the cross in the biblical account. If you're listening, you don't know this story. Jesus is dying on the cross. There's a thief on either side of him. One is mocking him, saying, "Hey, if you're the Son of God, why don't you take yourself down off this cross?" And
I saw that Mel Gibson documentary about this. It was phenomenal.
Oh,
I'm kidding. I was
thanks,
talking
man.
about Sorry,
you were talking about the Passion.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Funny guy.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and and the documentary, and the other thief is like, dude, what are you doing? Like this guy here in the middle, he doesn't deserve to die.
Yeah.
Well, so then now you have this guy saying, hey, so will you remember me when you come into your kingdom? And Jesus says, yeah, today you'll be with me in paradise. Well, I don't know how often we pause to think about how amazing that interaction was, because that guy didn't know much as far as I know. I don't know what that guy knew.
Yeah, that guy wasn't premillennial, dispensational. Like, he didn't have the Dallas Theological Seminary fundamentals all in a row.
Exactly, but he recognized Jesus, and that's a big thing. So for me, I can have this absolute metaphysic, absolute, orthodoxy, whatever I want. I can say, yeah, I'm pretty sure I believe these following things, but I can have this kind of and this scares people when you say words like this, but hang with me. You can have this relative epistemology. You can have this, I can learn from other people. I can learn from other traditions. All truth is God's truth, and I can still believe that as a Jesus follower, the informing stream of truth is Yahweh, is the Christian scripture. I can believe those things, and still there's a ton of room for me to say, how do I sit down with these other people and learn and listen from this community? Because yes, we do all share this thing called the Imago Dei, the image of God. And
I think it's easier, like if you need help working on your motorcycle and like the dude who helps you is like a Buddhist or something, like it's like, well, as long as he can help me with the motorcycle, I need help with motorcycle things, right? And so no one has to be a God follower to help me with motorcycle things. But then with God things,
yes,
I think there's this like, well, maybe I should only get God things from my crew so I don't get confused. I can understand why people
I understand
have
why
that.
it
Yeah,
happens.
you're right. But I think, again, I go back to we trade our full inheritance for a thimble full of grace. I think we live out of fear more than we need to. In situations like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Fear
of other rather than embrace of other.
Sure. Yeah. Fear of what we don't understand, fear of the unknown, fear of what might happen. Fear and tradition while there's great things about tradition too, there are things that I think that has halted, has paused the church so many times from being what she should be, and I don't want to live in that world of fear. I don't want to perpetuate that. I want to, and for all my Jesus following friends, we should not be, if we believe God is who he says he is, right? As Jesus followers, we should not be afraid to have these conversations with other humans. I had a friend tell me one time, I thought it was a great quote, and I don't know exactly all the ins and outs of this and what I think, but I think it's beautiful. I think he's onto something. He said Jesus didn't come to make better Christians. He came to make better humans. Yeah. And I thought, oh, wow, that's so interesting. You know what I mean? It's like, now do I believe as a Jesus follower that he's the way to the Father? Yeah, I absolutely believe that. But that doesn't mean I can't have a conversation with somebody who is desperately seeking to know God. Why should I be afraid of that? The Apostle Paul, we have this story in Scripture where Paul is walking through this area, and these guys are like all the smarty pants, all of the teachers of the time are meeting in this place. They're gathering. There's statues all over the city to all of these gods. And there's one that it has a name stamped on it. It says the unknown God. Now, Paul doesn't come into that community and say, yeah, let me tell you where you guys have it all wrong. The Illuminati, and, stop listening to, Beyonce.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I mean, he's not doing that.
All good advice.
Yeah, Katy Perry had, a diamond over her eye on the, I mean, it's like, and the dollar bill, man, and George Washington, and right? I mean, like
Skull and Bones, bro.
Right. Yeah. He doesn't do that. He says, this is fascinating. He says,
by the way, I would start following Jesus tomorrow if Paul said, don't listen to Beyonce, because that would be absolute proof to me that something serious was going on back 2,000 years ago. He knew what was coming. But anyway,
right, absolutely. Thanks,
man.
Matt.
You're welcome, man.
Yeah.
No, wait, that wasn't a real thing, because I was sarcastic. I get it now. Anyway, keep going.
But
the unknown God.
You know what he says is, he says, hey, I see you people are very religious, right?
Yeah.
I mean, basically, he's like, yeah, I see you guys are asking some good questions. I see you're seeking to understand. One another. You're in this community together. You're swapping ideas. This area called the Areopagus.
Yeah. I got an idea.
Yeah. Hey,
one's in on the conversation.
You got this unknown God thing out here. Is it okay if I, can I have a seat at the table?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, it's cool. And
I'll slide in with this one.
So he starts to tell this story about Jesus, and this is fascinating. If these dudes knew anything about Paul before he was Paul was Saul, and Saul was a terrorist.
Yeah.
I mean, it's heavy stuff, right, man? And this guy, it's crazy. So he says, can I have this conversation? He begins to tell the story of, I think it might be like, this is the unknown God. These are the dots you can't connect. And the end of that says, like, some people were like, "Man, he's smoking crack." That's what the Greek says.
Right.
No, but some people but some people said, "Can we talk to you about this further?" And I go, man, as a Jesus follower, like, what a perfect, end to a conversation is if somebody to me says, "Can we keep talking? Can we keep talking? No matter what happens, can we keep talking?" I had a guy tell me raising my kids a long time ago. He said, raising my girls, he said, "Man, whatever goes awry, if you're still talking to them, it's going to be okay."
If they're still talking to you.
If they're still talking. Yeah, right. Well, exactly. If you're conversing with one another. And I want that so badly. You know, for anybody listening to this right now, like if we were friends, I would hope that we could sit down and have a legit conversation about these things.
Can you tell us? I asked you told me a story, and we're out of time here, but I'd like you to tell this story if you would. And I asked you to tell it on the air, and I'm interested how our audience is going to respond to this story. But you told me a story the other day about a conversation you had with a lesbian woman who came to seek some counsel from you, and I was wondering if you would mind sharing that story with our audience.
You know, these are hard conversations to have because it is volatile, and I understand. It's I'm just going to say right from the get-go, if I see something, I don't mean to, like, I'm so careful. I'm actually a believer in, like, if somebody says, "Hey man, don't say things that way, you should say them this way."
Yeah.
I don't want to fight that. I don't want to go, "Well, why do they want me to say that thing?" You know, this whole PC thing's horrible. It's like there's a huge part of me that goes, I so deeply want to use the words, the phrases, the inclusive statements that you want me to use so we can continue this conversation. It doesn't mean that I don't have, like, beliefs, you know, that are contrary to what yours might be, but I see you as human. So with that,
and I'll just say this, you know, the assistant producer of the show and my dear wife is a woman who identifies as bisexual. And after you told us both this story the other day, I got in the car with her and I talked to her about this, and I said, "What do you think about that? What do you think? What just happened when we heard this story? Did you hear someone delegitimize you? Did you hear a guy come into our house and tell a story that said, ultimately, I don't find you or your lifestyle acceptable?" And she was like, "Absolutely not. I heard deep love and transparency and friendship and relationship." And I said, "Can we tell the story on the air?" And she was absolutely.
Well, I hope everybody would please just give me some grace as I kind of fumble through this story and know that, I'll just. There was this woman who came to our church, and this was in Jackson, Michigan, when I was there. Lesbian, married to another woman, raising children together, and I was running all of the arts team. I was one of the lead pastors, but I also ran all the arts teams and created these experiences on the weekend.
Can I hit the pause button on the way so I don't forget things? I'll be very quickly. First thing that's fascinating about this is what you said, what you just said. This woman came to our church, which means you weren't in front of her job with a sign that says, "Fags are going to burn," right?
Oh, dear Lord, please. Right? Yeah, no.
She came seeking and asking and looking for honest dialogue about spiritual matters from your perspective, from your community, right? And you owe her that.
Yeah, and
honesty. And kick her door in and go, "Oh, two women, Sally has two mommies, yucky," right? She came looking for this, and this is powerful to me, right? Because that changes the context of everything that happens.
She did, and she felt comfortable being in our community.
You were talking about people that give you access to say things like that to you,
right?
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was invited into a conversation with her, and that's a big deal. That's an important point. You're right.
So continue,
And so she asked to get together with me, and she, her and her wife, they meet me in my office, and they say, we just want you to be on it. Well, first of all, she asked if she could be part of our lighting team, right? You know, and I was like, absolutely, of course, I love it. And so we had this relationship that was growing. I'd see her on the weekend. She was part of the production. It was super fun. She's super fun and bubbly, and So her and her beautiful wife, they meet me in my office and they're like, hey, can you just be honest with us as a pastor of this church? And we realize this is volatile. This could be, kind of dangerous. And believe us, we're not setting you up for like failure or anything. Like, we're not setting you up here. We want to know honestly, what do you believe that the Bible says about homosexuality? And specifically, she says, do you think it wasn't what God originally intended? And I'm shaking because I'm like, the way I answer this question, this is so like, how do I put my words together? So I say, oh, please give me some grace. I have been diving into this. First of all, I look at the Christian scriptures as an authority for me. Right? Now, I understand that people interpret this all kinds of different ways. Yeah. And please give me grace. I must have please give me grace 100 times in this. I'm like, I keep asking questions. I keep wanting to know. I know I'm wrong about things about 25% of the time, and I don't know what 25% that is. And so in my understanding, I would have to say where I'm at right now is that no, I don't believe that was God's original intention. And she says, thank you. And she says, as a Christian, as a Jesus following pastor, I don't want you to ever not be honest with me, because that's part of what I'm attracted to in this community. And she said, I hear what you're saying. And I'm like, oh my gosh, as the words come out of my mouth, I'm like, oh dear God, am I wrong? Yeah. Is there something I'm not getting? Because, oh man, I'm like, smack me upside the head if there's something. But in my finite understanding, she said, I get all of that. I understand that. And she said, here's the other thing. She said, you may find this interesting to believe, but I've been a Jesus follower for a while. And she said, I actually struggle with my own sexuality because my finite understanding is that I actually think it wasn't God's original intention. And I'm like, my mind is blown at this point. And she's like, I've been struggling with this my whole life. Now, please, anybody who's listening, don't hear me say, this is not
people struggle.
Oh my gosh, this is not some weird,
It's just this
please,
story.
let's not talk about Pence. It's not this. I'm not saying this.
Yeah.
What I'm saying. So here's this beautiful conversation I'm inviting into, and we're both saying, we're both screwed up and we may have these things wrong, but can we at least, without fear, admit this is where I'm at right now and I may be wrong?
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful thing, man. Well, so we have this great relationship, dude. And, man, I can't even tell the story without, I'm going to lose it here. She gets cancer. And we watch her struggle through this, right? And her wife, when she's in this state, laying in a bed in her home, in her living room, her wife invites me to come into their house.
Just you?
Just me. Bring a guitar, and she just starts throwing songs at me. She's like, "Can you play these songs?" And I'm holding this woman's hand in between songs, and I'm trying to speak like anything I can to her, and I have to believe the God I serve, and I'm telling her this. I'm like, He loves you so much. And if you pass over today, I fully believe He's going to embrace you. He's going to love you. He's going to say welcome. And dude, and I'm like in between songs, and I start telling her the story. And like the corners of her mouth come up. Man, she's just grinning, and I'm shaking. Like, dude, it was a holy moment. Now, did I say some things
these three
wrong?
people, this couple, and you.
Yeah, that was it, man.
In these final moments.
These final moments, I like
all the people they could have asked there. Something you said in that conversation didn't repel her,
or didn't say, right?
Yeah.
It's like, now, am I putting a feather in my cap for that?
I don't feel
Therefore,
so.
do as I say.
Yeah.
No, I probably said some stupid things along the way, but I think she gave me a huge amount of grace as I asked for, and I give it to her. We had honest dialogue. And I saw her as human. She saw me as human. She didn't see me. I didn't wear labels. She didn't wear labels. And I get it. I get we have to define some things to be able to talk about them. I get that. But what a beautiful thing, man. I want more of that. I want more of those conversations. Did that threaten in any way what I believe to be true about Jesus? Being a follower of his, what I believe about Yahweh. Does that? No, it didn't threaten it at all, man. That was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And yeah, thanks for asking me about that, because
thank you for sharing that,
it's
man. That's a powerful story, and I challenge our audience. There's a lot of people that listen to this show who might be tempted to walk away from that story going, that guy said that woman, God doesn't approve of that woman's life. And that's the only thing they're going to hear from that.
I'm completely aware of that. I hope.
And I challenge my audience to go further than that and to go as far as they can as well in the acceptance of what you just shared with us. And, you know, for what it's worth, there's a book by a woman named Kathy Baldock, who is from Colorado. Kathy Baldock, I can't say her name right, but who wrote a book called Crossing the Bridgeless Canyon, and she's a Christ follower, and she was out hiking and a woman's walking the other way, and she would always see her, right, passing, and then she finally was like, hey, how's it going? You know, I always see you hiking out here, and they struck up a friendship, and it turns out this woman was like a Native American lesbian woman, and this other woman was like a white Christian lady, right, and they became friends, and then it was like, oh, I'm a lesbian, and then she had this initial like, oh, you're all gonna burn, you know, kind of thing. But then it sent her into a kind of historical, biological and biblical study of homosexuality, and her biblical discussion of the sections of the text that deal with this is profound. It may change some folks' minds and how they understand those texts. It may not. I think the key in this is the love and the grace and the humility in which these conversations are approached, and that regardless of what we think about people's choices, we don't feel like we get to be the arbiter of the diminishing of their humanity. And I think that's very profound, man.
There's something that happens when you remove the thought that somebody else is your project.
Yeah.
Beautiful things happen, you know, and I think I have friendships today that I think would have disintegrated a long time ago had I said that person's my project or they said that to me.
I probably should have been your project 6-8 times.
Oh,
man,
gosh,
so I appreciate you not.
Are you kidding me?
Last question, man. We got to let you go. You've been so great to sit here with us. I hope you don't mind if I ask you about your daughter's illness a little bit, because in our conversation this weekend, that was something that really moved me. And you talking about the test that was. When you have a sick child, you know, if anything's going to test somebody's faith, if anything's going to test somebody's ability to get up and live a righteous life day to day, one can get depressed, one can get bitter, one could get angry. And, you know, you said a few things to me, and I'd like maybe you to tell as much of that story and how you process it. But when you said how you had to say to your daughter a few times, I've not done this before, you know, like even though I'm the adult and in my 40s and the pastor and the dad and all these layers of authority and experience, there's so many things that I've never done and I'm just brand new at them and I suck at them and I'm afraid and we got to go a step at a time through this. And I thought it was a really terrible story to hear about her suffering, but a very beautiful story of a family overcoming.
My daughter has, and I didn't ask her permission to share this, but it's a bit all. But I can tell. I'm gonna
the things that you won't think.
Yeah, I'm really careful that, you know, when I tell my kids stories, but
protect her.
But this is, I think this is safe. I appreciate you walking into this like this. So she has two things going on. She has what is called ehrlichiosis, which is a co-infection of Lyme. And she has another disease called Q fever. And both of them are, they are draining, especially working in tandem with one another. They are bacteria that cross the blood-brain barrier, so they move throughout your body. There's an ongoing war with the CDC on these, on specifically the Lyme-related diseases right now, because the CDC does not recognize long-term antibiotic treatment for the treatment of Lyme and its co-infections. However, everybody else says the only way that we can get rid of this stuff is long-term antibiotics.
Yeah.
And so there's a great documentary you can watch on this, by the way, called Under Our Skin. I believe that's the name of it. It's fantastic, very insightful, informative. And if you're suffering with this disease, I'm so sorry. I can't even begin to imagine what you must be going through, because I don't even understand it for my poor daughter, and I live with her. And there are times for me, and this is where it gets tricky, you know, with a teenage daughter early on with this disease when she was like 12, 13, where you're going, okay, the way that this thing is manifesting itself right now, is this just...
Or just being obstinate or lazy.
Sure, is that what's going on here, or what's going on? And you don't know. And so as a parent, you go through a wide range of emotions. You go through anger, you go through... angry at them that they're not, cleaning the room, going to school, finishing their work, whatever the case is, getting in the shower, being somewhere on time. And then you go through an incredible amount of guilt when a doctor finally says, oh, by the way, your daughter has these two things and one could kill her. And you're like, so I'm a jerk.
Yeah.
And you start playing those tapes of every time. The guilt starts and the shame. And then, it's been a road. Now I'm careful.
And then probably some exhaustion too, right? After all of the care that comes.
Sure. Not near the exhaustion that poor girl goes through, but and there's guilt with that too. You're like,
what am I complaining about?
Well, I'm tired. I got to go hook up your IV. How selfish is that, man?
Yeah.
But,
right.
So it's been a road. I've learned a ton from my daughter in this, and we've always wanted to create a space with our kids. And if any of my kids are listening, I don't know that I've ever done this, superbly. But we wanted to create open dialogue with our kids and let them say whatever they want to say to us. Be honest with us. I want to know exactly where you're at. Don't try to hide it back.
I say the same thing to my kids, and it fucking sucks when they actually do it. I go, hey, man, I want total transparency and honesty, and then they say some shit, and I go, hey, what the hell are you saying that for? How dare you? That hurt my feelings. And then I have to go, wait a minute. I asked for the honesty, right? So I want to create that with my kids too. I say it and I mean it when I say it, and then when they do it, I'm going, this is horrifying.
It's reciprocal too. Like I'm asking that of my kids too. So can I be honest with you too? Can I be invited in? And just like I would do with anybody else. My kids are humans. It's like my little humans. It's like. And so I've learned a lot from her, being honest, talking through her struggle with this. And I think the thing that gets weird is, like, I don't want anybody to hear to say, like I have some sob story as a parent, with this. Like, this is not some weird, and I don't ever want my daughter to feel like, I have such a hard time parenting you.
My life is hard because of my sick child.
It's not that.
That's not what I got from it.
But I want to be honest with her and say, sometimes I'm going to be like really bad at this, but I'm not going to know.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to figure this thing out, and she's been super patient, and she's such a princess, man. She's what was that movie, man? The Italian movie with the subtitles. During Nazi Germany,
Life is Beautiful.
Life is Beautiful. Ding, ding, ding. Thank you.
Yeah.
But you know how Principessa, he uses Principessa in that. Yeah. And so I've always called her my Principessa, man. And man. She is truly that, and she's a beautiful human, and I've learned so much from her. And we don't agree on all things, spiritually too. That's been a fun conversation with her, and to give her the space to be able to talk about those things. It's a beautiful thing.
What a gift to give them. If you came hard and gone too strong, and we're like, you gotta, you know what I mean? Like,
oh gosh,
color in the lines here with your spirituality, or else, you know what I mean? If you would, a lot of parents panic when something like that happens and try to pull them back into the fold and you kick them right out the door.
Doesn't mean I've never been scared.
Yeah, well, of course.
I'm a dad. Are you kidding, man? I want the best for my kids. I want them to make wise. I want them to make wise choices. I want them to
experience joy in the world. Terrible father.
But yeah, man, it's been a tough thing for any of you that are suffering with these things. man, I am praying for a cure. I am praying for that things change with the way that hospitals and the health system and insurance companies and the CDC views these things. It's a tough road, man.
My indigenous friends say, and maybe we'll close here, that everything is an act of worship to them. My native friends say that they have ceremonies and they have church, right? Where they have worship and they have ceremony, but that to them there's no wall between. You said that the wall between the secular and the sacred is blurry for you as well. So my indigenous friends say when we sweep the floor, that's an act of worship, right? When we make a meal, that's an act of worship. When we build a house together, that's an act. Like everything. When you're brushing your teeth, that's an act of worship. And I think when you're dealing with a sick kid, when you're going in and plugging in an IV in the morning and alcohol swabbing thing, like I feel like this is an act of worship too. You know what I mean? And I think this is a profound way to look at it.
It absolutely is, man. I mean, I look at at worship for me. I define that as like responding to everything that I know God is with all that I am. Right? Like this is which requires daily sacrifice for me. It requires a daily sacrifice. You know what I'm saying? Paul says to present your bodies as a living sacrifice. This is your reasonable act of worship. Like the laying down of self for others is a huge part of worship. So it absolutely is that, and I'm hoping that through this experience that's our new normal, and I want her to find ultimate healing physically. Oh my goodness! But she has learned beautiful things through this tragedy too. I never, like, don't hear me say, no, I wouldn't trade the experience, because of what I've learned. No, actually, I wish she never had the disease.
Yeah.
Like, I would trade it.
Yeah.
It was funny. She was a little girl. I was like, oh, man, if I could take all of your pain and put it on me, I would do that. Don't you understand that? I would do that. And she said, well, that's dumb. Why don't you put it in a glass?
Yeah. Easy there, martyr guy. Yeah. I need you around. Well, that's dumb. Our kids teach us things.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So I don't want to be like all wax spiritual and esoteric, man. What I've learned from this, no, I actually wish she never had the disease.
Yeah.
But there's something about this.
But since you're here,
submission to one another and through these reciprocal acts of worship. Yeah, I mean, we learn a lot about each other, and I think we learn about the Creator, and we learn about the Imago Dei, and we learn about the image of God in one another, and it's something else, man.
The Hebrew concept of Mashiach, of Messiah, comes from this. I've talked about this. Comes from this very idea that when we're struggling, when we're in the midst of something horrible and polluted, and it seems there can't possibly be any growth here, any hope here, any clean soil from which something abundant and beautiful and life-giving can grow, you just keep digging a little further, and you're going to hit that clean dirt. You're going to hit that healthy soil that you can plant that seed in, and then once you do, it will grow, and it'll grow right up through the middle of all of that pain. And this is keep digging, right? No, there's nothing there. Well, keep digging, and you'll find it. You'll hit it at some point, and that's a profound thing. Israel, those who struggle with God, they're in the name of these people, right? We've talked about the struggle against him, struggle alongside of him, struggle with themselves, struggle with the planet, struggle with each other. The struggle, right, of working their salvation out daily with fear and trembling. I mean, I feel like that's a powerful, powerful thing to be reminded. John Voelz, thank you for being here, man.
Dude, I'm so glad. Thank you.
This has been spectacular. I've told people, I told my ex-wife, we went to see my son Noah's film festival the other day. I told them that we were seeing you, and my ex-wife, her mother, my son, none of these people are Christ followers. My wife, Celeste, not a Christ follower, and all of these people just love you, man. They were so excited to see you, so excited. Oh my God,
making me cry now, dude.
His mom got her,
I'm a big old baby.
Face lit up when I told her you were here. You know what I mean? And
well, I love Julie.
Yeah,
I love her.
Yeah, man.
And I love you, man.
She's a great person.
I think you're having what you're doing. I think matters. I think it's a beautiful thing, you know. I'm appreciative of the people who listened to this today, who stuck through to the end.
There's probably only 4 or 5 of them left, but hey, those people need to be here, man.
Yeah, I just want to say to both of you, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. That's hilarious, man. I've told people before that if I come face to face at some point with the God you serve, I'll recognize him because of the characteristics and the traits that are so evident in you. And I thank you for that. I thank you for being a person who walks that in a way that is very hard to detract from. I think the message you carry, if people resonate with it, that's great. If people don't resonate with it, then that's great for them too. And maybe they will at some future point. Maybe they won't. But I feel like you're a person who lets, if the message is offensive to people, then that's something they can process and work out. But I feel like you don't present it in a way where they can pin that offense on you. I feel like you try to pull as much of your own ego and your own limitations out of the way, right? And just simply be a reflection of the grace you've received. You're trying to offer it to other people if they're interested in it. And there's just, not only is there no shame in that, I think there's a great amount of dignity in that. And
thank you.
When I put down the people in my life who have always been a sort of absolute manifestation of credibility and of integrity and of just who can love people with wild abandon, you're on that short list. So thank you, brother. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, man. Thank you, everybody.
You're listening to On the Block Radio, folks. Our guest has been John Voelz. Get yourself over to the website to check out some links to his stuff. Check out some of the music. You might even hear a song or two with me playing a little lead guitar on it. And but don't let that scare you away. We love you all, and we will see you on the other side.
That are changing with the move of Yahweh's hand. May that understand take heart. His refuge is everlasting. Yeshua's name be praised. The night of sorrows passing shouts.
Strength in my song. Cry out and shout, thou inhabitants of Zion, for great is the Holy One of Israel in the midst of thee.
Hello, this is Reverend Billy from the Stop Shopping Choir. Honored to be on the block today. Amen.
I'm John Van Sloten, and I'm the author of The Day Metallica Came to Church, Searching for the Everywhere God in Everything. all began when I preached a sermon on U2, and a young kid in our congregation came up to me after the sermon and said, hey, Pastor John, can you preach a sermon on my band? And before I asked him what his band's name was, I said yes, and he said, okay, well, my band's Metallica. And then we both kind of looked down at the floor and didn't know what to do. And I told him I'd pray about it, which is how us pastors sometimes slough people off. And the next morning, that night I did pray about it, and the next morning somebody who's new to the church called me and said he had 2 tickets for the Metallica concert that Thursday and wondered if my wife and I would go. And so we ended up going to the concert thinking that was some divine hand in what God was doing there. And had an experience at the concert. It was loud, it was smoky, it was everything that a metal concert would be. But there was a moment near the end of the concert where they sang Nothing Else Matters. And it's kind of an acoustic ballad, and everybody in the congregation, everybody in the Saddle Dome put their arms around their girlfriends, and they all started singing along with James Hetfield. And the song is a kind of lament. And as they were singing it, I just turned around. My wife and I were right on the edge of the stage and just looked around the Saddle Dome and saw 17,000 Calgarians crying out to God that life is not the way it should be. And that kind of got my heart, and I thought, okay, I got to look at this some more. And so I went back and listened to the lyrics of every single song Metallica had written up until that point, and I found as I was doing that, there were these connection points. I'd read a lyric and go, I know that, that's from this part of the Bible. And all these sort of Metallica biblical couplets came together in my mind. And so I wrote all of those down, and then I went to research the band and found out that why they were so angry. And 2 of the band members in particular had horrible childhoods growing up. Hetfield grew up in a Christian sect that told his mom that she just had to have faith and her cancer would go away, and she died of that cancer. And the other guitarist was abused by his father terribly for a 16th birthday. His dad beat his mom up. And my heart kind of broke for the human beings that were authoring and singing a lot of these songs. And then I did some more research on James Hetfield, and there was a quote where he was obviously further on in terms of dealing with his anger and rage about God and the church and things that are wrong in the world. And he was saying to an interviewer that he's realized that he can't drink his anger away or sing it away, rage it away. He can't drug it away, but he realizes the only way he's going to get rid of his anger is through forgiveness. And the moment I read that, I knew that I could preach this band. If a heavy metal lead singer is preaching a gospel of forgiveness, that gets me close enough to what our gospel is, which is obviously hugely about forgiveness as well. And so I can keep going. We preached the band, and 200 metalheads came to church that Sunday. Lars Ulrich called Warner Music Canada and said, send a camera crew down to that church. We want to film it. The reason he was intrigued was because we weren't slamming the band, which I'm sure lots of churches have done for them and for heavy metal music in general. We were comparing them in a positive way to Old Testament prophets. Metallica got mad in many of their songs at the same things the Old Testament prophets and Jesus got angry at. So they came, they filmed it. We thought they were going to sue us and take us down like they took down Napster for using their music, but they were genuinely intrigued in what we were doing. And then the story went around the world. I had interviews with rock stations, not faith-based rock stations, across North America, Irish National Radio. It was on rollingstone.com. This huge story about this crazy church that dared to see some of God's good in the music of Metallica. Well, it is my heart that people belong to God, but it's scriptural. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Psalm 24 starts with those words. There is a worldview that says that everything is God's, the whole world. God so loved the world, He loves everything that He made. He made material reality. He made human beings. He made human beings with creative capacities to make music. God loves all of those things. He hates that it's messed up, that it's broken, that sin has entered into the world and corrupted everything. But just because things are corrupted doesn't mean they've lost their original creational goodness. And the worldview that we're living out of is that things are still innately good, even though everything has been tainted and twisted and perverted by sin. And so theologically, that's how we justify looking for God in these places. But we also justify it by believing that I mean, Christ, God came to us, right? He came from a perfect, holy place to a dirty, broken place with a bunch of messed up people like you and me, and did that to reach us and touch us and introduce us to who He is. Why would the Spirit of Christ not be doing that right now at a Metallica concert, or in a movie theater, or through the science of kids studying at the University of Lethbridge or in Calgary? This has been a journey for us as a church, and it happened to us as a church. We used to do culturally relevant sermons to be relevant. Now we're doing these cultural, creational sermons because we believe they're revelatory. We're moving from just being relevant to being revelatory. And so you'll see a progression. If you go to our church website at newhopechurch.ca and just click the links and find the messages, progression, where early messages were pretty much using cultural stuff as illustration.
Hey everyone, this is Kelly Carlin, and you're listening to On the Block Radio.
I've learned this about life. The first step to being unhappy is trying to please everybody else. I mean, what's the point of gaining the world's approval if that gain means you lose yourself? It doesn't add up. So why do we care so much about the opinions of others that could care less about us? I care so much to be liked, and why? Just to impress people who could care less about my life? Just to impress people who magnify my flaws, judge my imperfections as if mistakes aren't a part of us all? As if we all never fail? We all struggle. And it doesn't make you better because you hide yours well. It doesn't make you better because you act like you got it together. Because we both know if your walls could talk, they would say something different than what you let the world see. So crucify me, shame my name, pick me apart, but I'm through fearing your commentary because only God can judge me. And that's not an excuse, that's the truth. But when you understand that hating on others only means you aren't working on you. Work on who you are, because that's the person you're responsible for. And exposing someone else's battles won't do a thing to help you win your war. Giving pain won't heal yours. And it's crazy that it's imperfect people who we pretend to be perfect for, who we hide our purpose for, because we're so afraid to be labeled fake. Take it from me. Just because you made some past mistakes doesn't mean your future can't be great. Believe that. Ignore the hate. God forgives, and that's a fact. And to the people criticizing someone else's path, well, I guess you forgot where God met you at. I guess you forgot that you got a past too. But don't you forget this. God is my final judge, not you. I'm not here to live for you. I'm not here to please you. So if you get high off of making other people feel low, then feel free, pick me apart. Because at the end of the day, your opinions, your hate, your criticism can't stop this purpose. Because God knows my heart. Can no hater stop God's favor. Remember that. It all starts with you. It's rehab time. Let's get it.
You've been listening to On the Block Radio with Andrew Gurevich. The show is produced in Portland, Oregon by Michael DiNapoli at MD Productions. Theme music by Moving the Mountain. Closing music by Jonathan Oak. Look us up on the web at ontheblockradio.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Don't forget to tune in next week for a brand new episode. Previous episodes can be found on our website. Thanks for listening.
Oh, you're beautiful kitty kitties. Oh, look at you out there. Beauty like a bolt, light in a darkened hallway. New minds, looking at this world and our lives with the perspective of apocalypse children.
On the Block Radio with Andrew Gurevich. The show is produced in Portland, Oregon by Michael DiNapoli at MD Productions. Theme music by Moving the Mountain. closing music by Jonathan Oak. Look us up on the web at ontheblockradio.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Don't forget to tune in next week for a brand new episode. Previous episodes can be found on our website. Thanks for listening.
Oh, you're beautiful kitty kitties. Oh, look at you out there. Beauty like a bolt of light in a darkened hallway. New minds looking at this world and our lives with the perspective of apocalypse children. Standing dusty in the barren highways, standing broken before the fathers who were meant to make us whole, but who only lied to us about what it meant to be a man, about what it meant to be a woman, about what it meant to be a child of this doomed